Hello guys, welcome to Fanfiction Audiobook. Here you find original fan-made audio stories. Enjoy the journey into new worlds.
Black Clover, Asta's Berserk Awakening. Part 1. Ah. This burning youth really can't escape the curse of 10,001 finger handstand push-ups. How Fan tearfully processed the memories of the Clover Roaring Emperor, Asta. How familiar this tragic setting was. Similarly abandoned by the mainstream power, Rock Lee couldn't perform ninjutsu but could at least accumulate chakra. This kid is straight up a magic insulator. At least according to his current memories, he's lived to 15 and still can't use magic. He can only pin his hopes on the annual Grimoire acceptance ceremony, which seems to be coming up soon. Until then, Asta could only train his body like a demon every day and drink a bottle of Moguro juice, which was said to increase magic power, to comfort himself after every workout. Truly a pitiful and helpless boy. He's really had enough of being mocked these past 10 plus years. Even the other abandoned brats at the church don't respect him. How Fan sat on the soft soil, propping himself up with his hands as he lazily gazed at the sky. Since he's so pitiful, then from today on, I'll be the roaring, Pitui, I'll be Asta. Then today, I'll start with 501 finger handstand push-ups. How Fan spoke as he propped his body up with his thumbs. From this powerful body, it was clear Asta hadn't slacked off over the years. Then let him break the limits of this body once more. 1. 2. How Fan endured the pain from his thumbs. Since Asta had never trained finger strength, suddenly doing one finger handstand carried the risk of breaking his fingers. Because of this, How Fan didn't crazily jump straight to 10,499. 500. It took How Fan about 2 hours to complete 501 finger handstand push-ups. When he stopped, his entire right thumb had turned purple-blue due to the sudden massive force and prolonged blood backflow. Index finger, middle finger, ring finger, and pinky too. How Fan continued with his index finger on the ground, but he only needed to do 400 for the index, 300 for the middle, 200 for the ring, and 100 for the pinky. For this session, How Fan cultivated from morning until evening to finally complete the one-finger handstand task for all 10 fingers. This body is still too weak. Spending a whole day just training fingertip strength is such a waste. How Fan said regretfully. Back when he was Rock Lee, he spent every day under Might Guy's lead, tearfully doing handstand runs, climbing mountains barehanded, hitting tree stumps, and honing martial techniques, a series of youth-burning exercises. Though it was bitter, he had learned all the skills Rock Lee should have. Aside from opening the 8 gates which required a gradual process, everything else was no problem. But, this really hurts. How Fan shook his 10 sausage-like fingers. If only he had chakra to soothe them right now. Even though Rock Lee had a casting handicap, he could at least use chakra to nourish his body. Wait, can chakra be accumulated in this world? If it can, this unlucky Asta wouldn't have ninjutsu blocked too, would he? How Fan's eyes lit up, and he immediately closed them to start accumulating chakra. When he meditated with full concentration, a small white energy body seemed to appear in his dantian. How Fan snapped his eyes open, that was chakra. Chakra really can be accumulated in this world. Does that mean I can perform ninjutsu? How Fan thought of the various awesome ninjutsu from the Naruto world and couldn't help but want to shout. As expected, transmigrating a couple of times isn't a bad thing. Ding dong. Detected a second-dimensional energy body in the host's body. Opening Naruto Mall. The host can exchange points for various Naruto items. Holy crap. There's such a good thing. Why didn't you show up last time? How Fan said angrily. Because you didn't have a second-dimensional energy body then. Fine, I'll give you full marks for that explanation. How Fan remembered the system was called the 10,000 Realms Trading System. Well, it truly lived up to its name. Trading abilities from one world into another. In short, System Boss, you're the best. Open the mall. How Fan spoke excitedly, and a series of Naruto items appeared before his eyes. Dojo Technique. Single Tomo Sharingan 10,000 points. D-Rank Ninjutsu. Shadow Shuriken 50 points. Binding Technique 50 points. Clone Technique 50 points. Transformation Technique 50 points. Items. Soldier Pill 1 point for 10. Kunai 1 point for 10. Healing Potion 1 point per bottle. Long live the System Boss. I want the Sharingan. Hao Fan grinned excitedly. Even a single Tomo Sharingan would be enough for him to go wild in this magic world. Single Tomo Sharingan. Normal effect. Slows down enemy attack speed. Insight is improved. Special effect. 30% chance to cast Genjutsu. 30% chance to copy the opponent's magic. Hao Fan clicked to check the effects of the Sharingan in this world. Although there was only a 30% chance for Genjutsu and copying magic, it was still very exciting. Most importantly, he could finally use ninjutsu in this world. Plus, with his taijutsu learned from Might Guy, once he opens the 8 gates, won't he be able to crush whoever he wants? Next is grinding mobs for points. The only way to get points from this system was to grind mobs for points, which is a very common leveling method. Hao Fan left the skeleton cave and dragged his weary body toward the church down the mountain. Today was truly a productive day. Hao Fan shook his aching arms. If only he could exchange for a bottle of healing potion right now. Honing taijutsu isn't like cultivating chakra or meditating for magic where diligence alone is enough. Training taijutsu is like maintaining equipment. If you only wear it down without knowing how to maintain it, you'll soon ruin your body. Before, he had chakra to nourish him, but now he had just accumulated a tiny bit. This bit of chakra would dissipate into his limbs before it could even reach his hands. Grr. A mountain wolf that had been hungry for 3 days crouched low, staring intently at Hao Fan as he walked down the mountain. When Hao Fan exposed his defenseless back, the mountain wolf suddenly lunged out, its drooling teeth smelling foul even from a distance. Youth really is a Konoha whirlwind. Hao Fan's waist twisted incredibly, his body instantly performing a 360-degree rotation, and his toe kicked hard against the mountain wolf's teeth. Awoo! The mountain wolf howled in pain. Its canines flew everywhere, and its entire body was sent flying by the massive force hitting its face. Bang! The mountain wolf's head slammed into a tree trunk, shattering its skull and killing it instantly. Truly a pitiful little wolf. Hao Fan had already seen this mountain wolf, which seemed to have been pushed out by its pack due to weakness, when he passed by. However, killing an old, weak, or disabled wolf didn't seem to yield many points, so he hadn't bothered. But the wolf had no situational awareness and rushed to its death, so he couldn't be blamed. System prompt. Host has killed one ordinary mountain wolf, gaining 1 point. Oh, not bad. Hao Fan immediately used that 1 point to exchange for a bottle of healing potion. Can be taken internally or applied externally. Treats common headaches, colds, and traumatic injuries. Hao Fan looked closely at the description. It was a versatile potion for minor injuries, and if used in a bath, it also had the effect of nourishing the body. It looked decent enough. Gulp, gulp. Hao Fan downed half a bottle of the healing potion first. It tasted a bit sweet. As the potion flowed through his stomach into his limbs, Hao Fan clearly felt the injuries on his fingers improve a lot. The color changed from a scary sausage red to a blue-purple, though the hand injuries were clearly not fully healed yet. Let's try external application. Hao Fan poured some healing potion into his left palm and then rubbed his hands together. Hiss, fool, that's intense. He didn't expect the healing potion, which tasted okay, to sting like chilly water in the nostrils once applied to his hands. An ordinary person would have been crying for their parents from the pain, but Hao Fan was a man who had been trained by Might Guy. His pain tolerance was top-notch. Mama, it hurts like hell. Hao Fan rolled around on the ground clutching his hands. Anyway, there was no one else around, so who was he putting on a show for? However, despite the pain, the effect was excellent. Soon, Hao Fan found the bruising on his 10 fingers had clearly improved. The color had gradually changed from purple-blue to green. While it was still fresh, Hao Fan poured a bit more on his hands, and soon his 10 fingers could be used flexibly again, though they still looked a bit swollen and bruised. Very good. Seeing the efficacy of the healing potion, Hao Fan nodded in satisfaction. Now he could burn his youth without any reservations. Although Asta didn't slack off and was desperate in his training, easily reaching thousands of reps for common exercises like push-ups and sit-ups, his training intensity was always within human limits because he didn't have chakra to nourish him. So Asta's current physical fitness wasn't enough to open the 8 gates, and he couldn't even reach the requirements for some high-difficulty taijutsu moves. But his current strength should easily be able to crush some brats who just got their grimoires. There's going to be plenty of training from now on. How Fan casually tossed the mountain wolf into the depths of the forest so as not to scare the little flowers passing by. As the sun set, the villagers working in the fields also packed up their tools to head home. It's unusually quiet today, one villager remarked. Yeah, I didn't see that naughty brat all day. Another villager couldn't help but laugh. Probably because he was rejected by Sister Lily the other day and got discouraged. Haha, I really don't know what's going on in that kid's head. Sister Lily is a clergy member. Even if she were to marry, she wouldn't marry a kid who can't even use magic. True, the child can't use even a bit of magic. His future life is worrying. You say they're both abandoned children picked up from outside, but why is there such a huge gap between Asta and Yuno? The villagers coming from the fields chatted in small groups, but their voices lowered when they saw How Fan coming down from the mountain in the distance. Asta, why are you back covered in mud again? And you disappeared for the whole day. What did you eat for lunch? Sister Lily gently patted the mud off How Fan with a feather duster, her eyes full of worry. Gurgled tilde tilde. Just as Sister Lily finished speaking, How Fan's stomach began to growl. He couldn't help it. A day of high-intensity training had left him famished. PFF'd. Go eat. Sister Lily couldn't help but laugh at How Fan's awkwardness. I'll go to the kitchen to get your meal. Asta is back. You slacked off for another day. The church door opened, and out came a brat with a buzz cut, wearing a brownish-yellow vest, with eyes that looked like they could never fully open. Kid, shouldn't you use honorifics for your elders? How Fan looked at the brat who followed the same path as Nara Shikamaru and couldn't help but complain. This guy was in Asta's memories. He wasn't bad at heart, but his personality was similar to Nara Shikamaru's. However, he couldn't remember his name for a moment. It would probably come back in a few days once the memories fully merged. In this world, magic is everything. And you do stupid things every day, neglecting your duties. Sometimes I wonder if you're really the same age as Brother Yuno. The brat spoke venomously, but the next second his eyes couldn't help but widen. Because How Fan, who was 5 meters away just a moment ago, had arrived in front of him in a blur. At this moment, How Fan was half squatting on the ground, patting the brat's shoulder. Kid, there's more to this world than just magic. Regardless of strength, one should show the respect due to elders, because that's basic manners. How Fan patted the startled brat's shoulder earnestly, then stood up and walked into the church. Is he really still Asta? That serious look just now, and that speed that didn't even allow for a reaction, how is this possible? The little brat stood there dazed. The shock Asta gave him at this moment was too great. This Asta really had a convincing aura like Yuno's. How Fan walked to the kitchen, where Sister Lily was carefully heating up the food. Can't wait already. We caught a fish today, and I specially saved a bit for you. Sister Lily smiled gently. Sister Lily. How Fan's eyes sparkled with excitement, but this bit of fish was barely enough to make do. This small amount of protein couldn't possibly support his high-intensity daily training. It seemed he would have to find ways to improve his diet from now on. The fact that Asta was already 15 and still so short had a lot to do with malnutrition. With his current appetite, he would need at least 3 pounds of beef or mutton, or 10 large carbs per meal just to feel full. It seemed the road ahead was long and arduous. He would settle the food issue tomorrow before anything else. After How Fan finished eating, he lay back on the bed. He appeared to be sleeping, but in reality, he was cultivating the chakra within his body. For now, he couldn't count on magic, but having a skill for self-defense was essential since he was here. After all, this was a border village. While it looked peaceful now, no one knew what emergencies might occur. It was better to be safe than sorry. Starting the journey with a Zen mindset. As a new driver following the trend with a Zen mindset, I don't dare to overtake or anything like that. The next day, before dawn, How Fan habitually threw off his warm covers. It was currently that time of year when the weather was just beginning to warm up but was still chilly. Ordinary children wouldn't even dream of throwing off the covers as soon as they opened their eyes. Even if they woke up early, they wouldn't want to leave the warmth. But How Fan had already developed the habit of getting up the moment he opened his eyes under might guise, care. Today's task load is huge. How Fan dressed while organizing his thoughts. Well, the reason he had gone straight to bed upon returning yesterday, besides his body being truly exhausted, was another important reason. In such a large church where several people lived, there were actually only 2 bathtubs, and the bathing area was very crude. Generally, when the girls bathed, the boys would avoid the area, and it was the same when the boys bathed. Their usual bath time was every Wednesday, so even if Hao Fan wanted to take a soak with the healing potion, he didn't have the conditions to do so. Thus, the church renovation plan was put on the agenda. After all, making everyone's life happier was originally one of Asta's wishes. But this kid was too single-minded, only thinking about reaching the goal in one step by becoming the Magic Emperor, never considering using his superior physical fitness to help everyone with anything. Today's goal was simple. First, go to the river near the village to catch a dozen fish to fill his stomach, then go to the woods to cut timber. He decided to build a bathhouse with separate sections for men and women today. Right. No sooner said than done. Hao Fan finished dressing. During the process, Yuno opened his eyes once. His dark pupils were full of surprise, but he then closed them again as if he hadn't seen anything. What a little closet case. He's a bit like Sasuke. Hao Fan curled his lip, took an axe, a flint, and a coil of rope from the storehouse, and left the church, heading straight for the river outside the village. Morning, Asta. Going out to frolic again. A villager who had woken up early to cook greeted Hao Fan upon seeing him. Your granny. You think I'm a husky, frolicking. Watch out, or I'll give you a set of 100 ways to wreck a house. Hao Fan rolled his eyes and, after dropping a line about, not bothering with such a brat, turned away haughtily. What does that mean? The villager was bewildered. Has this kid actually become learned? Phew. Hao Fan exhaled a breath of turbid air. The distance from the village entrance to the stream was about 3 kilometers, and he had run the entire way doing a handstand. True cultivation meant racing against time. After all, the world never lacked diligent people. When you're on the same starting line, or even behind others, you must put in 300% diligence and wisdom to surpass them. Hao Fan sat by the stream. At this moment, both his arms were very sore and swollen. This kind of training was something Asta had never done before, so it could be considered developing a new field. Gulp. Hao Fan opened the healing potion and took a large swig first. His body immediately felt warm. This healing potion was like milk, not only able to heal injuries but also providing a certain nutritional effect. Hao Fan shook the bottle. There was about a fingernail's worth of healing potion left inside. He filled the bottle with stream water, shook it, and then splashed the mixture of cold stream water and healing potion directly onto his 2 arms. Hiss, that's the stuff. Hao Fan bared his teeth. Although it stung a bit, the effect was top-notch. Soon, his aching and swollen arms felt much better. This healing potion is good stuff. With it, even without the nourishment of chakra, I can exercise twice as much as usual. Hao Fan nodded with satisfaction and then began working on tools for catching fish. He first found a diamond-shaped stone by the stream, and after sharpening it, he used the rope he took from the church to tie up the stone, which now looked like a kunai. Perfect. After making the fishing tool, Hao Fan went to the edge of the stream. At this time, many carps that had grown fat over the winter were swimming in the stream. But don't be fooled by their weight, their speed was still as fast as ever. Therefore, the people of Hage village rarely went fishing in this kind of weather because they might catch a cold from touching the cold water, which wouldn't be worth the gain. Go. After aiming at a fat carp, Hao Fan flicked his wrist with his back to the stream. With a plop, the sharp stone pierced through the fat carp Hao Fan had just targeted. Swish. Hao Fan flicked his hand, and as the carp broke through the water trailing from its body reflected a brilliant rainbow under the morning sun. Well, my kunai throwing skills haven't regressed after all. Hao Fan squinted his eyes. The fish he was catching now were for himself, so his methods were simple and crude, prioritizing speed. In a short while, he had caught 10 large carps. Carrying the carps, Hao Fan went to the woods near the river. He picked up a pile of firewood along the way and lit it with the flint. Before long, the aroma of fish wafted through the forest. I wonder if I can attract a few wild beasts. Hao Fan was thinking about the 1 point he got yesterday from easily killing an old, weak mountain wolf. He had decided to first improve the living conditions in the church, which was also a way to create a comfortable training environment for himself. Otherwise, if he lacked food today and drink tomorrow, how could he train? So for now, he didn't have time to go deep into the forest to hunt monsters for points. Burp. After Hao Fan was full, he picked his teeth with a very gloomy expression. He was wondering who had leaked the news yesterday evening. He had only killed a mountain wolf, so why was it that after roasting fish in the forest for so long, not a single lost jackal, wolf, tiger, or leopard had followed the scent? Is this even a border village? It's a bit too peaceful. Whatever. After eating his fill, Hao Fan began to fell trees. Although he knew nothing about architecture, he fortunately had a lot of strength. Relying purely on brute force, he would pile up a bathhouse even if he had to. Heave ho. Heave ho. Cutting trees is also a form of cultivation. Hao Fan was like might guy possessed. Youth must always burn. Thud. In 5 seconds, a tree trunk as thick as an adult's thigh successfully hit the ground. Next is the fine processing. Hao Fan quickly stripped the bark and trimmed the branches. Soon, the tree was turned into fresh timber. I'll need to cut about 17 or 18 more trees like this to build a grand bathhouse. Hao Fan thought about the little Lawless and Sister Lily in the church, each having their own charm. This gave him a feeling of keeping beauties in a golden house, so this bathhouse had to be grand. Around noon, Hao Fan carried a pile of wood that looked like a small mountain and walked toward the village step by step. Carrying wood is also a form of cultivation. Hao Fan gritted his teeth. Although Asta's body had high explosive power, his endurance was still a bit lacking. Carrying timber that weighed over 50 times his own weight was already very taxing. Now is not the time to give up. Hao Fan's back was almost horizontal to the ground. When he walked on softer soil, he would even leave deep footprints. Look, what kind of monster is that? My god, it's covered in wood. It's a wood monster. No, that looks like Asta, the rascal from the church. Good heavens, how heavy must that be? The villagers who were preparing to head home from the fields for lunch were all stunned. No one could have imagined that a child only 15 years old could carry so much timber. Make way, make way. Hao Fan carried the dozens of logs to the open space outside the church and came to a dead stop. Then, the pile of wood landed perfectly with a series of bangs. Not bad. If I put in more effort this afternoon, I should be able to build a bathhouse. Hao Fan wiped the sweat from his forehead. Asta, did you bring all of these here? A little loli wearing blue and white clothes looked at Asta in shock. This was even more shocking than Brother Yuno using magic to spin dry clothes or split firewood. Because in this world, using magic wasn't rare, but people who trained their bodies to this extent were truly few and far between. Yeah, in a bit, Big Brother will build a bathhouse for you all. I guarantee it'll be nice and warm so you can bathe even in the middle of winter. And I'll even make a dedicated bathtub for each of you. Hao Fan leaned toward the little loli and spoke while wiggling his eyebrows. Ah, Asta, you handsome rogue. The little loli shyly covered her face and ran back into the church, leaving Asta standing alone in the wind, confused. He thought he had been quite honest and hadn't said anything suggestive. Asta, what good deed have you done now? The father burst the door open like a steam train with a bang, then froze upon seeing the mountain-like pile of wood. Asta, did you hijack a wagon of timber? How pathetic. Hao Fan curled his lip. If he were going to hijack something, it would be money. Why the hell would he hijack a pile of wood? Oh, you've learned how to be sarcastic now. The father's eyes widened as he activated his priest sarcasm skill. Look at our church's rising star. He's known how to help the church with chores since he was little. Then look at you, doing nothing but playing with mud in the mountains all day. I plan to build a luxurious bathhouse for our church. Hao Fan said while picking his nose. What was that? The father was stunned, his sarcasm skill cut short by Hao Fan. I've had a great dream since I was little, and that's to strive to give every kid in the church their own dedicated wooden bathtub. Plus, they won't have to worry about avoiding each other or picking specific days to bathe. They can soak even in the dead of winter. Hao Fan said calmly. Ha ha ha, stop joking with me. If you knew how to build a house, then you would be the rising star of our church. The father laughed heartily while clutching his stomach. TCH, don't believe me then, but don't blame me when your face hurts from being proven wrong. Hao Fan rolled his eyes, turned around, and walked back outside. Where are you going? It's time to eat. The father called out to stop Hao Fan. To improve everyone's diet, of course. Hao Fan rolled his eyes and quickly ran toward the stream. This time he didn't run on his hands but advanced at full speed. With this body's full explosive power, it only took him 5 minutes to run to the stream 3 kilometers away, which was already twice the speed of an ordinary person. Go! Hao Fan repeated his old trick, but this time he wasn't as violent. Controlling his strength, he used stones to bind the carp. After binding about 15 of them, Hao Fan found a resilient long branch, wrapped the fish onto it with a rope, and ran back with them on his back. Hao Fan had just reached the church entrance when a kid, who looked a bit like Narration, opened the door while holding bowls and chopsticks. As soon as the kid saw Hao Fan, he immediately switched to sharp-tongued mode. Asta, everyone is waiting for you alone again today. Yuno caught a fish with magic around noon to improve everyone's lives. When will you be able to catch a fish and bring it back like Yuno? Oh, that kid Yuno is quite on the ball. Hao Fan raised an eyebrow and then told the kid to step aside. It's fish. After Hao Fan walked in, the kid saw the large carp tied to the branch, which seemed even bigger than the one Yuno had caught. However, the kid quickly curled his lip. After all, counting yesterday's, Yuno had caught 2 in total. But as Hao Fan continued further inside, the kid's eyes widened. The fish on the branch were like gourds on a vine, one after another. The second one. The third one. Quote. The 7th one. The 15th one. The kid's mouth hung open. Was all of this real? As the king of troublemakers and the emperor of roars, Asta had actually caught 15 carp. Seems like I caught quite a few carp. Hao Fan finished speaking with a curl of his lip, leaving the kid with a cool view of his back. He gave himself a perfect score for this bit of showing off. Father, Asta seems to have become a bit different these past 2 days. Sister Lily whispered to the father. The father stroked his chin, thought for a moment, and said, yeah, this kid is getting better and better at bragging. He actually told me just now that he wanted to build a luxury bathhouse for you all, and even strive for every child to have their own exclusive bathtub. He's really playing the part. Ah. Sister Lily's mouth hung open. When did Asta start doing something serious? Truth be told, she was actually looking forward to this luxury bathhouse. Thinking about being able to soak in a hot bath every day, Sister Lily couldn't help but blush. After eating lunch, Hao Fan chose a piece of open ground next to the church. Then, he began using an axe and other tools to carve mortise and tenon joints into the prepared wood blocks, such as convex square tenons, round tenons, double-layered convex tenons, dovetail tenons, and tongue and groove joints. This way, he could build an entirely wooden bathhouse like stacking building blocks. Give up, Asta. You've never built a house before. How could you possibly build a bathhouse? Nash ran out to mock him. It's you again, kid. Let me tell you, how do you know it's impossible before you've even tried? Hao Fan rolled his eyes. This kid was really full of negative energy. If he could be trained by Might Guy for a few days, he'd surely become another fine youth burning with the fire of youth. Asta worked so hard to prove that even the poor and abandoned could realize their dreams through effort. Wasn't that also to inspire children like Nash who were full of self-pity? What if I say I can finish building this house before dawn tomorrow? What will you do? Hao Fan looked Nash in the eye and said. Under Hao Fan's firm gaze, Nash couldn't help but feel ashamed, but he still stubbornly said, if you really can finish the bathhouse by tomorrow, then I'll respect you just as much as I respect Yuno. But if you don't finish it, then don't dream your pipe dreams every day. Since you're an orphan and a pauper, you should have the awareness of an orphan and a pauper. Stop having delusions of becoming the magic emperor. Then it's a deal. Under the sunlight, Hao Fan smiled confidently. Although he had only researched building houses with mortise and tenon structures out of interest and had never practiced it, turning the impossible into possible, isn't that what youth is all about? Whether it was Konoha's Rock Lee, Might Guy, or Might Guy's father, or Clover's Asta, which one of them wasn't abandoned by the mainstream cultivation system of their world? But which one of them ever yielded to this fool, misplaced fate? In other words, who are we afraid of? After making the vow with Nash, Hao Fan began to focus on making the mortise and tenon joints. Not only that, he also meticulously drew the blueprints for the house on the ground. Either don't do it, or do it to the best of his ability, that was his creed in life. After preliminary calculations, this house would require about 3,500 different structures of mortise and tenon joints. But this didn't deter Hao Fan. The advantage of Asta's constant physical training over the years finally showed. He was like a demon, lifting massive logs and constantly trimming them, finally using the limited wood to prepare over 1,000 pieces for either roof beams or walls. This isn't enough. I need to go logging, and I also need 4 massive tree stumps for the foundation. Hao Fan immediately rushed into the forest to select suitable timber. Fortunately, this forest was not lacking in towering trees, so he had plenty of construction materials. It doesn't look like Asta is joking, does it? Can he really build a bathhouse in one day? The sister and the others all looked at the seriously busy Hao Fan in surprise. Although they didn't know what Hao Fan had been carving into the wood blocks, it looked very impressive. He is indeed serious. Yuno looked at Hao Fan seriously. As his self-appointed lifelong rival, he never doubted Asta's seriousness, but why was he still unable to use magic? Yuno clenched his fists and silently said to Asta, "You'd better grow up fast. If you don't, I'll leave you far behind." A victory that takes no effort is truly irritating. In the evening, Sister Lily called Hao Fan for dinner. "You guys eat first, don't worry about me." Hao Fan stared at the remaining 30 logs. He had to finish all the mortise and tenon joints before it got completely dark, otherwise, such fine work would be very difficult to complete once night fell. If that happened, wouldn't he lose to a discouraged little kid? "But how can you skip dinner? Thanks to you, we made 3 fish tonight." The sister wanted to persuade him further, but she was stopped by the father. "Let him be, otherwise he won't give up." The father sighed. He had basically watched Asta grow up, and he understood Asta's temper better than anyone. Once he set his mind on something, it was hard to pull him back, like becoming the Magic Emperor or marrying Sister Lily. Clang clang bang bang. When night fell, Hao Fan lit a large bonfire, making the open space outside the church very bright. Then, he began to assemble the bathhouse according to the planned sequence. This night was destined to be a sleepless one for Nash. Although he didn't say it, Asta's never-say-die spirit had gradually influenced him. Sometimes he really envied Asta. As someone who couldn't even use magic and had experienced so much ridicule and irony since childhood, he could still live so optimistically every day and never gave up on his dream for a single moment. Dreams. That really is a distant thing one doesn't dare to hope for, isn't it? Nash shed tears. Could orphans like them really have dreams? At the thought of the pitying and mocking expressions of the children from noble or wealthy families in the city, he didn't dare to think of those 2 words. He only dared to make himself numb, as if he didn't care about anything, carefully protecting himself inside an eggshell. But he was also truly unwilling. The next day, at dawn, Hao Fan, with his thin but lean upper body bare, lay lazily on the ground with an unknown blade of grass in his mouth. From time to time, the hot sweat of youth flowed down his forehead and back. He had finished. Before him stood a building 5 meters high with an area of 100 square meters. He had already divided the interior into male and female sections. The partition in the middle was made of the thickest wood, a full 3 meters thick. Inside, everyone's exclusive bathtub was placed. From today on, he could finally use the external effects of the healing potion to strengthen his body. Hao Fan rubbed his empty stomach. The amount of work tonight was quite significant. Today he felt like he could eat 20 grilled fish. Hao Fan quickly went to the riverside. This time, he set up a fire right by the river, fishing while grilling. After eating his fill, people in the village had already begun to get up, and Hao Fan ran back to the church doing a handstand on his hands. "That kid from the church's family is really energetic." "Yeah, he's much more energetic than my kids," the villagers remarked. Most of them were very simple and kind-hearted, and they held some goodwill toward these orphans in the church. Over the years, they had helped the church quite a bit. At this time, the father and the others walked out and were all shocked to see the tall bathhouse. "God, my face hurts." The father craned his neck and widened his eyes. "That kid actually built it. It probably isn't made of paper, right?" The father rushed to the door. It was a typical sliding door. When the bathhouse door slid open and he saw the bathtubs inside, he couldn't help but shed old tears. This Asta had finally made something of himself. "Oh my God. Sister Lily, Asta really built a bathhouse for us." Stars appeared in Leica's eyes. Girls have the least resistance to bathing. Now she could be fragrant every day, and she even had her own exclusive bathtub. She no longer had to share one with others. He really finished it. He really finished it. Nash stood dazed on the spot. A task he thought was absolutely impossible to complete had actually been finished by the magicless Asta. At this moment, his whole body trembled, and he felt something collapsing bit by bit. Nash, the real embarrassment isn't the ridicule of others when you're realizing your dream, but that you don't even have the courage to face your own dream. Hao Fan stopped and spoke as he passed by Nash with his exhausted body. Nash grit his teeth and clenched his fists tightly. After a long time, he looked up and said fiercely, "What nonsense are you talking about? Is there anything more embarrassing than being mocked by others for overestimating yourself? Asta, when you were mocked for wanting to become the Magic Emperor, didn't you feel even a bit of shame? You have to know, you're someone who can't even use magic. So what?" Hao Fan suddenly leaned into Nash's face. "Do you think a real man cares about that ridicule? I can lose to others in magic, I can lose to others in height, I can lose to others in birth, but in terms of effort alone, I will never lose to anyone. Have you ever tasted the juice of the hidden leaf? That hard to swallow taste is like bitter gourd juice, but even if I have to pay the price of my life, I will leave evidence that I lived as a man, rather than hiding my dreams under a numb shell like a coward. Nash, remember this, a person who doesn't believe in themselves doesn't even have the value of working hard. If you don't even have this much self-confidence, what will you use to resist fate?" Hao Fan left behind a figure that looked extremely grand in Nash's eyes as he walked forward. His words shocked not only Nash but also Yuno, who had also remained where he was. This is the feeling, this blood-boiling feeling full of unceasing fighting spirit. Asta always brings hope to people. Yuno clenched his fists. This was how his only self-appointed lifelong rival should be. Hao Fan's words washed over Nash like a sudden enlightenment. His gaze gradually became blank, then slowly turned firm. "Big brother Asta, please let me train with you." Nash suddenly bowed deeply, his tears bursting out. He also wanted to burn his youth like Asta. He didn't want to live under a protective shell anymore. "Very well. After breakfast, come find me at the Skull Cave and burn your youth with me." Hao Fan curled his lip. Being able to transform Nash, who was just like Nara Shikamaru, into someone like Rock Lee who burns his youth all day long, this was definitely a great sense of accomplishment. "That's right, this is the scent of wood." The father took a bite of the door frame. This texture was definitely real wood. This wasn't made with magic, was it? Sister Lily couldn't help but marvel as she walked into the bathhouse. She knocked on the wooden bathtubs for a while and then poked the walls to see if they were sturdy, finally discovering that this was indeed a large and solid bathhouse. To be honest, she had never seen such a grand bathhouse in her life. "Father, what were you saying yesterday?" Hao Fan walked up to the father and asked while picking his ear. Cough. "Asta, I solemnly announce that from today on, you have also become a rising star of our church." The father's face turned red as he gave a dry cough. "Asta, could you build a partition for our church?" Leica ran excitedly to Hao Fan and spoke. After all, they were all squeezed into one room, making it inconvenient to even take off their clothes at night. It was fine in winter since they could huddle together for warmth, but in summer it was miserable. Even in 30 or 40-degree weather, they didn't dare to strip down to sleep. Of course, but the structure of our church is different from the bathhouse. This will probably take some time. Hao Fan squinted and smiled very sincerely. He felt that everyone sleeping squeezed together was quite good right now, so he had no intention of building a partition. "This is bad. A wild boar has run into the village." The panicked voices of villagers came from the fields. A 3-meter-tall wild boar, like a brownish-yellow tank, was rampaging through the village. The villagers were frantically using magic attacks, but they were at most small water balls or fireballs usually used for daily life. This level of attack not only failed to drive it away but instead infuriated this boar in its prime. Oink oink. The wild boar's pupils gradually constricted with rage. After locking onto children huddled together under a large tree, it lowered its head and charged fiercely toward them. "Help!" The children let out shrill screams. "Someone, save my child!" A woman fainted from crying on the ground, and many adults reacted the same way, because in the face of such a massive wild boar, they truly lacked the ability to resist. "This is bad. Lily, Quickly take Yuno and the others to hide in the church. No sooner said than done. The father mounted his broom and was about to rush out, but a figure even swifter than him had already charged forward. Asta. The father's eyes instantly turned red. For a moment, he even forgot to ride his broom and instinctively tried to grab Hao Fan, but Hao Fan charged toward the wild mountain boar like a blue beast. This is meat. Hao Fan was so moved that tears streamed down his face. These past few days, every meal had been either sweet potatoes or grilled fish, his mouth was practically tasting like nothing. Today, he could finally improve his diet. Asta, come back. Yuno shouted in shock. When he saw Hao Fan's figure charging out without looking back, he unconsciously remembered that cold snowy night from years ago. That figure, just as small and thin as him, who had charged at the thug's time and again for the sake of the pendant around his neck. Yuno, where are you going? Sister Lily reached out to grab Yuno, but Yuno had already rushed out without turning back. The bond between Asta and brother Yuno is indeed as good as Sister Lily said. Nash stared blankly at Yuno's figure as he chased after without hesitation. Clearly, they were just as fragile before this wild mountain boar, yet Asta had charged out, and even the usually calm Yuno had followed. Asta. What exactly is youth, anyway? Nash roared at the top of his lungs. He felt that he had lived too cowardly these past few years, acting like an old man with no desires or ambitions. But in reality, he also harbored aspirations and ambitions in his heart. He also longed for a period of regretless and passionate youth. Youth. Hao Fan stopped in his tracks, glancing sideways at Nash, whose cheeks still bore tears. Then, a pale green aura erupted from his entire body. Huff, huff. The wild mountain boar was originally charging with unstoppable force, but it suddenly felt a terrifying whirlwind kick up beside it. It couldn't help but look sideways, its eyes instantly widening. Youth. That is a hot-blooded Konoha whirlwind. Hao Fan soared into the sky, appearing exceptionally dazzling under the sunlight. Then, he delivered a heavy kick to the wild mountain boar's skull. Like a massive battering ram, the wild mountain boar flew high into the air before crashing heavily back to the ground. Children. Villagers. Father. Yuno. Nash. Wild mountain boar. Everyone present, except for Hao Fan who was looking at the wild boar meat with an excited face, fell into an idle state. Are we saved? The children looked at each other in bewilderment. That can't be. The villagers' eyes widened. Just now, they seemed to have seen a scene of a hero saving the world that only appeared in plays. But how could the protagonist be that troublemaker Asta? They must have been seeing things. Possessed by a demon. Bah, 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 it should be possessed by the magic emperor. The father remained in his chasing posture, dumbfounded. This scene was simply too shocking. A teenage boy had actually kicked a multi-ton wild mountain boar into the sky. As expected of Asta, he always manages to make the impossible possible. After a brief moment of amazement, Yuno was the first to recover. He wasn't surprised at all that Asta had the strength to slaughter a boar, because this was the man worthy of being his lifelong rival. But you must grow up quickly. After all, this world ultimately depends on magic. Yuno looked at Hao Fan's back with concern. Perhaps in the Grimoire acceptance ceremony in March, Asta could awaken his magic by obtaining a Grimoire. Is this what youth is? Nash still had bubbles coming out of his nose. He felt his heart beating wildly the moment Hao Fan leapt up like a god. For the first time, he felt the taste of being alive. I'm just going to die like this. In its final moments, the wild mountain boar glared fiercely at Hao Fan, who was already drooling. It never expected that its life as the majestic wild mountain boar king would end so prematurely. Don't just stand there, everyone. Skin it, cut the meat. This big guy should be enough to feed the whole village for a few days. Hao Fan called out. Oh. A villager standing closest instinctively turned to go home and get knives to cut the meat, but as soon as he turned his head, he felt something was wrong. Was the point of this really just cutting meat? Brother Asta is a hero. At this moment, a little yellow-haired boy summoned his courage and shouted, his voice instantly infecting everyone. Right. Asta is a hero. He saved the hope of our entire village. A villager also shouted loudly. At this moment, many villagers who usually gossiped about Asta felt ashamed. They hadn't expected that the boy they used as a negative example would save the village today. Haha, it's just a small mountain boar, everyone needn't be like this. Hao Fan waved his hand, then looked at the father and said, "Father, don't forget to cut more meat for our church." After saying that, before he could be completely surrounded, he immediately ran toward the mountain. After all, youth waits for no one, and his cheat was to work 100 times harder than anyone else. No problem. The father now looked at Asta with more and more favor. It was like an owner looking at a husky that was no longer acting up. That serious look in those eyes actually seemed quite impressive. System notification. Host has killed one ordinary wild mountain boar, gaining 5 points. There are actually 5 points. Hao Fan was overjoyed to hear the system notification. At the same time, he looked deep into the distant forest. Killing mountain boars was great. Not only could he eat meat, but he could also earn points. Open the shop. Hao Fan opened the shop. Seeing that the familiar Naruto items were still so expensive, he gave up and exchanged his points for 4 bottles of healing potion and 10 kunai. Long time no see, old friends. Hao Fan stroked the sharp tip of a kunai, his gaze gradually becoming sharp. He casually threw it forward and to the side. The kunai burst through the air, creating rings of white vapor before pinning itself firmly into a tree trunk. A poisonous spider about the size of an adult's fist was instantly blown to pieces by the powerful impact of the kunai. I need to speed up my training. I must train my body to the point where I can open the gate of opening before March. Hao Fan arrived at the familiar demon's skull. Now his path of cultivation was very clear, the path of taijutsu and accumulating chakra within his body. These two complemented each other like two horses pulling a carriage. Once they started galloping on the road to success, they would be unstoppable. As for that ethereal magic, Hao Fan wasn't considering it for now, but he still had to drink the bitter leaf juice. Who knows, a miracle might happen one day. In short, he would never surrender to fate. So, today's task is 601 finger handstands on the thumb, 500 on the index finger, 400 on the middle finger, 300 on the ring finger, and 200 on the pinky. Hao Fan did a clean flip, supporting himself on the ground with a single thumb, his body held straight. With every bend of his arm, he placed the entire weight of his body on his right thumb. Having adjusted from yesterday, his body had gradually adapted to the one-finger handstand, so it wasn't as painful as it was at the beginning. Patter, patter. As the sweat of youth poured down like rain, a timid yet unyielding set of footsteps came from outside the skull. How long is this kid going to wait before coming in? If he waits any longer, he won't be able to finish today's training volume. Hao Fan grumbled. He had already formulated a practical plan based on Nash's physical condition. Now it just depended on how strong Nash's desire for youth was. Asta, I'm here. Nash finally summoned enough courage to walk in. He knew that from the moment he stepped into this skull, his life would undergo a world-shaking change. Very good. Like me, start with 10 two-handed handstands. Hao Fan spoke. What? Nash was shocked. How could this be possible? In this era where magic reigned supreme, everyone neglected physical exercise. Even many mages of the Magic Knight squads probably couldn't do 10 handstand push-ups. Since you want to break out of your shell, if you don't put in some ambition and sweat, are you dreaming? Hao Fan scolded. Fine. Nash grit his teeth and began trying to do a handstand, but he fell to the ground after several attempts. This was simply not a movement an ordinary person could complete. You can lean against the mountain wall and slowly support your body up, then start exercising once you've maintained your balance. Remember, you only have 1 hour to complete this set of training. If you can't even finish this small challenge, then you'd better just stay hidden in your eggshell and accept your fate. Hao Fan spoke coldly. I won't accept my fate. Nash thought of Hao Fan's words, even if it costs me my life, I will leave behind proof that I lived as a man, and his blood boiled. He also wanted to leave behind proof that he lived as a man. 7, 8, 9. Just one last one. After half an hour, Nash was like a toddler, tremblingly bending his arms. His eyes were bloodshot from being upside down, and salty sweat even dripped into his eyes, stinging them, but he couldn't give up. Because he was also a man with resolve. However, at this moment, Nash felt as if his arms were like springs pressed down by a sledgehammer, no longer having the strength to bounce back. At this point, he really wanted to give up, but Hao Fan was right in front of him. He could even clearly see that Hao Fan's thumb had gradually turned bruised due to the blood accumulation. Surely it must be very painful. Even at this moment, Asta hasn't given up. So what reason do I have to give up? The 10th one. Nash straightened his body again like a sprout emerging from the frozen earth in spring. By now, his clothes were completely soaked with sweat, and he felt he had never exerted so much effort in his life. Very good. Next is 50 sit-ups, 50 squats, and later you'll follow me on foot for 5 laps around the village. That's your training volume for today. Hao Fan spoke immediately, causing Nash, who had wanted to relax, to catch his breath again. He chose to do the squats first because his arms felt useless, like scrap metal, sore, numb, and unable to exert any strength. He hoped his legs would still have strength after finishing the squats. Meanwhile, Hao Fan was like a precision machine part. Every movement was meticulous. Like an old horse chewing night grass, he ensured every inch of muscle from his fingers to his arms was fully exercised. At the same time, the chakra accumulated over the past 2 days began to circulate weakly within his body, greatly clearing the blood accumulated in his arms. After a day of training, both were exhausted, but Hao Fan clearly had no intention of letting Nash rest. Nash, come, do a handstand. Let your big brother show you the unique and grand scenery of Hage Village. Hao Fan showed a smile that looked exactly like Might Guy's, a smile full of sunshine, but it made Nash tremble all over. Are you a demon? There's more. Nash's mouth hung open. This definitely wasn't abuse, was it? Wah. This is what youth should look like. Hao Fan gave a thumbs up, showing his bright white teeth, and then led by example, running on his hands. Nash had no choice but to bite the bullet and follow. When the two returned to the church exhausted, they found it packed with adults and children. Asta, my little ancestor, you're finally back. The father was usually the best at socializing, but today the villagers' enthusiasm was truly more than he could handle. The key was that these people weren't here for him. What's wrong? Hao Fan asked curiously. If these people wanted to show gratitude, they could just send more wheat and flour. That way, everyone could eat proper staple foods instead of relying on sweet potatoes to get by. Asta, it's like this. These children all want to train by your side. Their parents also feel that it's a good thing for the children to exercise with you, it's better than them running wild all over the world. Lily explained, looking flustered. I see. Hao Fan raised an eyebrow. So, they were all here to apprentice under him. No wonder those brats were looking at him with such respect. So, Asta, do you agree? A villager asked happily. In his view, taijutsu was ultimately inferior, and with the whole village showing him such face, Asta had no reason to refuse. Yes, yes. We've prepared quite a few apprenticeship gifts for the children. There's plenty of food like grain. Another villager added, boasting a little. I refuse. Hao Fan said decisively. Don't think he couldn't see the contempt these villagers held for taijutsu. Even the children who wanted to learn taijutsu mostly had arrogant expressions on their faces. A group of people who didn't respect taijutsu at all, how could they be worthy of practicing it? Huh. The villagers, who had assumed there would be no problem, were all shocked. In their eyes, this was a mutually beneficial situation, there was no reason to refuse. We're all from the same village, you don't have to be so stingy, right? Are you worried that once the apprentice has mastered the skills, the master will starve? Asta, don't be so short-sighted. Who knows, one of these children might enter the Magic Knight squad in the future. When that happens, as long as they remember your teaching today and help you out a little, it would be enough for you to live quite comfortably. Alright, everyone, stop talking. After all, Asta is someone who can't use magic. In the future, he'll definitely have to rely on this bit of strength to make a living. If our children learn it, wouldn't that be taking away his livelihood? So, let's not force him. The villagers chattered away, making the originally peaceful atmosphere turn sour. A young man tugged at his chubby son's hand and said angrily, exactly. What's the use of taijutsu? This world values magic above all else. Come on, kid, let's go. No, I want to learn taijutsu. The fat boy dragged his father's hand with all his might. He had originally thought magic was the coolest thing ever, but seeing Asta today, glowing with a pale green light and leaping from the ground like a god, this blood-pumping moment had shaken his soul for a long time. Perhaps, a man's charm lies in these hot-blooded punches and kicks. Asta is not like what you say. He must have his reasons for not teaching. Nash was the first to stand up and defend him. In the past, regarding such matters, he would at most be angry in his heart, but he would never have stood up to express his opinion. But ever since the moment he decided to follow Asta to practice martial arts, he found that he had changed. He had become sharp, no longer hiding himself in a thick eggshell, wallowing in self-pity as before. Instead, he dared to stand up fearlessly like a man. You people, I really don't know what to say. Have you forgotten who saved you? A butcher who had been keeping his eyes closed for a long time opened them and roared, Is this the attitude you show toward your savior? Ah! Many villagers felt ashamed and didn't dare to say anything more. They grabbed their children and prepared to leave. May I ask why? Before leaving, the butcher, unable to resist his son's stubbornness, asked embarrassedly. Because, what I teach is for proper men with determination. Not for those who come to learn taijutsu out of curiosity, for fun, or to use it as an appendage to magic. And who gave you permission to insult taijutsu? How dare you look at it with such contempt and mockery? After Hao Fan finished speaking, enunciating every word, his gaze became sharp. A soul-captivating aura began to seep out from his body. This was the aura belonging to a powerful martial artist. It was an aura that made people tremble. All the villagers lowered their heads under Hao Fan's gaze. Their expressions gradually changed from arrogance to awe. At this moment, not only did the villagers shut their mouths, but even the people in the church looked at Hao Fan with new respect. Is this aura really Asta, whom I know? The nun, the father, Rake, Nash, and even Yuno, who had always had no doubt about Asta's ability, began to question it. Because the strength Hao Fan was displaying now was even more formidable than the aura of any big shot they had ever seen. Big brother Asta, I don't look down on taijutsu. I really want to learn. A little chubby boy said stubbornly. Me too. Another child chimed in. If you really want to learn, bring your determination and find me at the demon god's skull behind the mountain before the sun rises tomorrow. Hao Fan withdrew his aura. The demon god's skull behind the mountain had always been a nightmarish existence for these children. If they truly possessed the determination, he wouldn't mind teaching them a thing or two. The next day, including Nash, a total of 7 children arrived at the demon god's skull before dawn. Hao Fan naturally didn't hold back in his teaching. He carefully observed each child's physical fitness and then formulated a targeted training plan for each person. From then on, every day, the villagers could see Hao Fan leading a group of little monkeys, doing handstands while exercising around the village. Asta, I've seen you all chopping wood and building houses from time to time lately. If possible, I'd like to ask you to repair the fence for our village. That way, incidents of wild boars running into the village won't happen anymore. One day, while Hao Fan and the others were training, the village chief of Hage village suddenly walked over and said, Repair the fence. That's not impossible. Hao Fan nodded. After all, the father and the others lived in this village, so making the village safer was naturally good. However, expecting him to work for free was clearly impossible. The village chief was an old and crafty person. Seeing Hao Fan pondering, he immediately said, For this, the village has decided that no matter how hard life gets in the future, we will provide the church with enough food and aid for 5 years. Deal. Hao Fan snapped his fingers. Repairing the fence was a piece of cake for him. Although Hage village wasn't small, it wasn't as big as imagined either. Even if it were just him alone, a week would be enough. But now that he had 7 little monkeys under his command, repairing the fence was naturally a form of training. Kids, these trees look crooked and twisted, not round at all. Work on them. Hao Fan pointed to a large tree that was over 10 meters high. Yes. Nash and the others didn't hesitate. They held their axes more professionally than lumberjacks, and in no time, they had chopped down a large tree that required 2 people to wrap their arms around. Very good. This time our task is to repair the fence, so we don't need fine processing, we just need to sharpen one end. Also, how many times have I said this? Chopping a tree is the same principle as chopping a person. To deliver a full force blow, you must first exert force starting from your 2 calves. When the power from your legs travels up to your waist, use your waist as a pivot, and finally swing it down fiercely with your arms. This way, you can exert more power than someone who only uses their waist and arm strength. That is the full force a person can deliver. While training, Hao Fan also closely observed each child's movements, offering pointers from time to time. Although these casually spoken experiences sounded simple and easy to understand, they were the crystallization of the wisdom of the ancients. If no one pointed them out, these children would likely never understand these principles in their entire lives. Nash and the others applied force according to the method Hao Fan described. Keeping their waists still at first, they suddenly exerted force with their legs. Their whole bodies seemed to be flying, driven by the muscles in their legs. At this moment, their waists seemed to stretch like a civet cat, naturally bursting out a supple strength. When the power from the legs and waist reached their arms, every child felt as if a beast was about to rush out of their body. The force was unprecedentedly huge. Bang! When the axes bit into the tree trunks, Nash and the others' arms immediately went numb. Some children were even knocked to the ground by the rebounding force. But the effect was significant. One swing went 3 points deep into the wood, feeling deeper than 5 swings had before. When you unleash your full strength, you must know how to dissipate the force. This is the only way to protect yourself from being injured by your own explosive power. The secret to dissipating force lies in relaxing and desinking. As beginners, you can loosen your grip on the axe handle before it sinks into the tree trunk, preventing the backlash of force at the root. Once you are proficient, you can hold onto the handle and take advantage of this rebounding force to exert force a second time. This is called dissipating force while simultaneously borrowing it. Only then can you maintain a continuous, endless burst of power. While explaining, Hao Fan picked up an axe to demonstrate. He chose a large tree that was thick enough for 3 adults to join hands around. He gripped the ground firmly with his feet, then his calves instantly tensed. A tremendous force rose from his legs, then his waist twisted to exert force, carrying the massive power to his shoulders, and finally transferring it through his arms to the axe. Thwack! The axe landed fiercely on the tree trunk, leaving a cut nearly 1/5 of the way through. However, it wasn't over yet. When the axe sank into the trunk, although part of the force was absorbed by the tree, another part was returned to the axe through rebound. When Hao Fan sensed the huge reaction force coming back from the axe, he immediately used the momentum to lift it. Thus, most of the rebounding force not only didn't hurt Hao Fan but actually helped him pull the axe out and raise it again. As the axe drew a semicircle in the air, Hao Fan exerted force with his legs again, driving the axe back into the tree. Repeating this, he seemed to get more and more energetic with each chop, just like a perpetual motion machine. In less than 6 chops, a large tree with hardwood was chopped down by Hao Fan. Hiss! All the children gasped, because they clearly noticed that Hao Fan was chopping faster and faster. They knew that they had the most strength on the first chop, and their strength would drop significantly by the second. But Hao Fan did the opposite. The more he chopped, the greater his strength became. This is the charm of borrowing force. Hao Fan said. At this moment, bright lights shone in all the children's eyes. They finally realized that taijutsu actually possessed such charm. It only took Hao Fan and the others 2 weeks to repair the fence for Hage village. After 2 weeks, this barren village was surrounded by a 10-meter-high fence, and the people in the village changed their impression of Asta once again. Time passed bit by bit, and in the blink of an eye, it was March. Today was the important day for children in nearby villages who had turned 15 to go to the Grimoire Tower to receive their grimoires. Hao Fan and the others had arrived here early. After several months of intensive training, Hao Fan had gained a lot. His physical strength and chakra were enough to open the first gate of the 8 gates, the gate of opening. Besides that, what made him happiest was that he had grown taller, reaching Yuno's eyebrows. He had finally gotten rid of the shorty label. It seemed that he hadn't grown taller before because his nutrition hadn't kept up. These days, he had been maintaining himself with grilled fish, wild boar meat, and quite nutritious snake soup. Not only had he grown taller, but his body was also more robust than before. At this moment, he was full of masculine charm, which made many girls of the same age cast glances in his direction frequently. His white hair is so handsome. Don't you think his eyes look very serious? A few young girls whispered. This undoubtedly made the other men around them jealous, and 2 of them, whose clothes were noticeably more luxurious than their peers, darkened their faces. These shallow girls are actually infatuated with a shabby foundling. Will, with a square face, showed a look of disdain. It seems they are just village girls. Being able to marry a pig-slaughtering hero must make them very proud. Rake sneered in agreement. Both of them were rare nobles in this border region. Although their fiefs were a bit far from the capital, they had always looked down on these commoners. When they spoke, they did so as if no one else was around, without any fear of these words being heard by Hao Fan and the others. I heard our pig-slaughtering hero is someone who can't even use magic. If one were to marry such a man, maybe in the future, they could even charge a little admission fee to put him on display. Ha ha ha. Will and Rake mocked him to the extreme. Then, their smiles gradually froze because Hao Fan glanced at them coldly. He didn't retort or make any fierce expressions, but that one look made them feel as if they were being stared at by a demon wandering in the abyss. They shivered uncontrollably. Will and Rake shivered in unison. They looked at each other, and through the other's pupils, they could even see their own faces distorted by fear. Clowns. Hao Fan spat lightly. To be scared like this by just one look, that was something. But these two were at least sensible. If they dared to bicker again, he wouldn't mind putting them in their place. However, I don't know if I'll be able to get a grimoire today. Hao Fan looked around. This grimoire tower stored so many grimoires, surely one should fly towards him, right? Hao Fan was still very curious about magic. Over the past few months, he had learned something about this world, and the power produced by strong magic was no lower than that of ultimate level ninjutsu. Therefore, even if that grimoire only the size of a knee flew towards him, Hao Fan wouldn't mind. As long as he could practice magic, he promised to work harder than anyone else. Welcome, all recipients. May you who are about to embark on a new journey be filled with honesty, hope, and love, just like the clover. An old man wearing a reddish-brown magic robe descended from the sky, stepping on a magic carpet. His aged voice spread throughout the entire grimoire tower through the amplification magic in front of him. At this moment, whether it was the children coming to participate in the granting ceremony, the parents accompanying them, or the casual observers, everyone became nervous in unison. Because this old man was the master of this grimoire tower, and with his arrival, the grimoire granting ceremony was about to begin. I'm so looking forward to it. I wonder what kind of grimoire I'll get. A young girl said, clasping her hands together, her eyes filled with longing for the future. If my son can get a thick grimoire, I promise to host a banquet at home for 3 days, everyone will be welcome to come and eat. A boy's parent said excitedly. In his view, the thicker the grimoire, the more magic could be created, which surely meant the greater the strength, right? Honestly, not to mention a magic emperor, we don't even have anyone who has made any achievements after entering the Magic Knight squad. So, honestly, please, you must win some glory for this grimoire tower. The tower master spoke up to this point, his beard bristling and eyes glaring, saliva flying everywhere, which actually gave quite a few people a start. Then, let the awarding of the grimoires begin. After the tower master finished speaking, grimoires shimmering with brilliant light flew out from the bookshelves one by one. They first circled above everyone's heads as if choosing their masters, and then flew in an orderly fashion into the hands of the boys and girls. My goodness, I actually received such a thick grimoire. A young boy was so excited he nearly fainted on the spot. What's so great about being thick? Mine is twice as big as yours. Another boy said with disdain. However, where there is joy, there is sorrow. For example, the grimoire obtained by a thin, small boy was only the size of a palm. But, Hao Fan closed his eyes. Who the hell could tell him why everyone had one except him? Forget it, it's the expected outcome. Hao Fan curled his lip. Being rejected by the world's mainstream cultivation system wasn't the first or second time, so not getting a grimoire was no big deal. Now he had already accumulated 200 points. Once he saved up 10,000 points, he would exchange for a 1-tomo Sharingan to play with. Once the Sharingan was activated, he would still be the coolest guy in this world. It seems I'll have to go practice in the deep mountains and forests when I get back. Hao Fan sighed. He had originally thought that if he got a grimoire, he would go to the royal capital to live it up and witness the world's top combat power, but now that getting a grimoire was hopeless, he could only quietly go out to farm for experience. HMPH. I'm going to participate in the Magic Knight squad exam in half a year. Will said smugly, his eyes and brows filled with arrogance. We will definitely pass. Rake also said with extreme confidence. Life is now showing a gap. From now on, clouds are clouds and mud is mud. A castaway is only fit to linger on in the church. So what if you can slaughter pigs? Once we join the Magic Knight squad, we will have huge room for improvement. Even slaying a dragon is not impossible. Will looked at the empty-handed Hao Fan and couldn't help but sneer. It's truly pathetic. Not even a grimoire bothers with him. I heard that in many places, hillbillies with mediocre strength still shamelessly participate in the Magic Knight squad exam just to leave a glimmer of hope for a future life of farming, but he doesn't even have that chance. Rake also happily joined in the mockery. For this magic world, what was the difference between not being able to use magic and being a loser? I won't allow you to insult Asta like that. Nash gritted his teeth and stood up. Where did this poor guy come from? Get lost, Will said with disgust. Just at this moment, a cold, indifferent voice came from afar. Do you want to know what the real difference between clouds and mud is? Hao Fan looked coldly at the two, then placed his hands on their shoulders. What are you trying to do? This is the Grimoire Tower, you dare to kill. Will and Rake both felt a chill in their spines. This was a rhythm of disaster. Whoosh. As expected, Hao Fan dragged Will and Rake out of the Grimoire Tower as if they were two puppets. His speed was like a blue beast. When sprinting, chakra quickly condensed on his legs. His current speed was 5 times that of a normal person. Murder. Hao Fan's current speed was so fast that Will and Rake's screams sounded like echoes. However, when brushing past Yuno, the grimoire in Yuno's hand suddenly bloomed with dazzling golden light. This golden light quickly attracted everyone's attention. A 4-leaf clover blooms. The Tower Master's gaze focused. He was shocked to find that the back of the grimoire, which was slowly turning in the golden light, actually had 4 leaves. A clover grimoire! Exclamations filled the grimoire tower, just because this was the clover grimoire that the first Magic Emperor had also been awarded. As everyone knows, the 3 leaves of a clover contain honesty, hope, and love, while this 4th leaf harbors good luck. Besides the extra attribute of good luck, this grimoire itself also contained super strong magic power. This was simply the legendary strongest grimoire. Yuno seems to have gotten an incredible grimoire. Looks like I need to finish off these 2 small fries quickly. Hao Fan glanced sideways, then strode out of the grimoire tower. After rushing out, Hao Fan leapt up, directly carrying the 2 of them onto a 7-meter-high eave. Is it high? Hao Fan patted Rake and Will's shoulders like a big brother. At this moment, the 3 of them were in a very subtle position, all squatting on the very edge of the eave, and Hao Fan's 2 hands were placed on their necks, as if a gentle push would make them fall due to loss of balance. Hi! Will and Rake were shivering. The eave was only 7 meters high, but they were already so scared their legs were trembling. The pride that came from their lineage was long gone. Hao Fan found it boring after seeing this. He had no interest in scaring 2 cowards, but some things had to be said. The difference between clouds and mud, do you even deserve to say that? Who gave you the courage to mock the life others have fought for through hard work? I was wrong. Will started crying. At this moment, he only felt like he was about to fall, and his fingers were already numb with fear. I was wrong too. Rake said, trembling. Don't you think you're noble? Then come down yourself. After saying this, Hao Fan dropped from the high wall and returned to the grimoire tower in 2 leaps. Help! Will and Rake hugged each other and cried. Mages could usually fly on brooms, but they clearly hadn't reached that level yet, so they could only despairingly stay on the roof waiting for rescue. Inside the grimoire tower, Yuno's grimoire had already retracted its brilliance and fallen into Yuno's hands. And the surroundings were filled with envy, jealousy, admiration, and a hint of malicious gazes. Hao Fan followed that gaze and saw a man in the crowd with unkempt hair, triangular eyes, slanted eyebrows, and a scar on his right cheek that looked like it had been scalded by boiling water. That's a truly familiar look. Hao Fan laughed at himself. Since coming to this world, he hadn't encountered a bad guy for a long time, but this bad guy looked too much like Orochimaru, didn't he? The grimoire awarding ceremony ended successfully here. The Godfather happily took Lily and the others to buy things for the celebration. Thanks to Hao Fan these days, life in the church hadn't just improved by a notch, now they even had spare money to buy some daily necessities. And Yuno walked back alone, with the criminal who looked just like Orochimaru following closely behind like a shadow. Hao Fan curled his lips, following like a fisherman waiting for the snipe and clam to fight. Who are you? Yuno walked to a quiet passageway and turned to ask. To think you found me. But if you want to know who I am, I was quite famous back in the Magic Knight Squad as Chain Magic Revchi. Revchi said with a wicked smile. Revchi. Didn't you intentionally let me find you? Yuno said coldly. This black-haired man wearing a wine-red robe gave him a very uncomfortable feeling, especially when he walked into this quiet alley. The man suddenly erupted with an intense hostility that was hard to ignore. There's no help for it. If I let you keep walking forward and you run into people, it'll be troublesome. While Revchi was speaking, countless chains suddenly rushed out from the red bricks on both sides of the alley. These chains appeared so unexpectedly that Yuno was bound before he could even react. I don't seem to have anything valuable on me. Yuno said calmly while struggling secretly, but he found that after being bound by the iron chains, he couldn't mobilize his magic power at all. Resistance is useless. My creation magic, chain magic, iron chain prison, conceal the captive's magic and movement. And this clover grimoire in your hand is worth a lot of money, so that legendary grimoire is mine. Revchi watched Yuno like a cat playing with a mouse. His expression was filled with the pleasure of bullying the weak. Don't you know that only those chosen by the book can use a grimoire? Yuno frowned, wanting to persuade Revchi to give up this move. That's why I say you're still too young. You don't know what kind of price a clover grimoire can fetch among collectors on the black market. And as the man chosen by the clover grimoire, you should have soared in the world like a dragon, but who told you to meet me when you were young? It's truly a pity. Your legend is about to end before it even begins. Revchi laughed crazily at the end. His life was destined to be like this. After being exiled, he could only be a thief running around like a rat. But being able to see such a legend fall into his own hands was truly a pleasure that came from the depths of his soul. It seems that in the future, he should often return to this town to see what kind of life this legend he personally strangled would face. I'm afraid it will be plowing the fields while regretting that he met him. To let a legend chosen by a clover grimoire fall, are you worthy? Hao Fan walked into the alley with light steps as if taking a leisurely stroll, giving both Yuno and Revchi a big surprise. Look at this entrance. I thought someone amazing had arrived. It turns out to be a loser who doesn't even have a grimoire. You really are pathetic. Born in this magic kingdom but can't use a shred of magic. You really are a rare specimen that's hard to find in the world. Revchi was stunned for a second, then started to sneer, as if seeing a joke walk in. You descendant of Orochimaru, you seem to talk a bit too much. Hao Fan picked his ear, his face somewhat gloomy. As expected, guys who look like Orochimaru are all very annoying. Orochimaru. Although I don't know who you're talking about, hearing the word, descendant, is really unpleasant. The magic book floating in front of Revchi quickly bloomed with light, and 7 or 8 chains like black pythons locked onto Hao Fan from all directions. Asta, run! Yuno shouted instantly, because in his understanding, their current abilities could not compete with this mage who had been exiled from the Magic Knight squad, so the best way now was for Asta to escape and find someone. The good thing was that this place was very close to the Grimoire Tower, and he believed the Tower Master would definitely not sit idly by. But after Yuno shouted, a bizarre scene happened. Hao Fan seemed to have eyes all over his body. No matter where the chains popped out from, they were easily dodged by him. I'll just stand here and let you bind me. Let's see how long you can keep it up. Hao Fan stood in place and said lazily. As a man who had been trained by the Might Guy, he feared his movement techniques were already invincible in this world that had abandoned martial arts. You have really successfully angered me, brat. Creation magic. Iron chain prison. Revchi pointed at Hao Fan. This time he went all out, without any carelessness. A dozen black chains, agile as swimming dragons, roared toward Hao Fan. But as if to verify his previous words, no matter how thrilling the scene looked to bystanders, Hao Fan just swayed slightly in place to break free from these chains. How is that possible? Even a peerless genius chosen by a clover grimoire couldn't dodge it. How could a loser like you who can't even cast magic dodge it? Revchi's emotions became agitated. With his emotional fluctuations, more and more chains appeared from all sides, finally forming a terrifying magic field. Just at this moment, the system's voice rang in Hao Fan's ear. Ding! Detected mysterious power in the host's body. Do you want to load it? Confirm. Hao Fan raised an eyebrow, not expecting a second type of power to appear in this body. Loading. 1%, 2%, 3%, 28%, 57%. A translucent progress bar appeared before Hao Fan's eyes. The loading speed was quite fast, and by this time, Revchi had taken the opportunity to bind him. However, Hao Fan didn't care at all, because he was genuinely afraid that if he stretched his muscles even slightly, these soft and weak chains would snap. I was wondering how a good-for-nothing could dodge my attack. I didn't believe there was actually anyone in the world without a shred of magic power, but through the sensing of my chains, you really don't have any magic power at all, he. Revchi couldn't help but laugh as he said this, his eyes, which looked just like a snake's, filled with excitement. At least that friend of yours is a chosen prodigy, but you have been a born stray dog from the very beginning. How pitiful. Doesn't it feel bad to be abandoned by the whole world? So, if you don't want to be recycled so early, just resign yourself to your fate. Otherwise, I'll kill you. Revchi laughed in a snide, mocking tone. For him, today was truly a delightful day, he had actually found two beings even more unfortunate than himself. 99%. 100%. Loading complete. As the system's voice faded, Hao Fan raised his eyes. They were originally quite beautiful, with a circle of amber iris around the black pupils, but at this moment, they turned blood red from the inside out. Immediately after, a black curtain fell, swallowing all the light at the scene. Before anyone could react, red radiance, like dandelions, rose from the ground. The radiance drifted with the wind, and a grimoire, veiled in red light, descended before everyone's eyes. When the pure, blood-like red light faded, the back of the grimoire was revealed. 5-leaf clover. The 5 dazzling leaves deeply stung Revchi's eyes. A 5-leaf clover, it's actually a 5-leaf clover. Revchi retreated in terror. A clover grimoire was understandable, but a 5-leaf clover was unheard of. There is actually a 5-leaf clover in this world. Revchi looked at the book in disbelief, but the more he looked, the more terrified he became, because that thick, blood-like light made him tremble, as if it were the blood of a demon. Abandoned by the world. It seems you understand the feelings of people like me very well. In your eyes, no matter how hard we try, we are just as laughable as a bunch of stray dogs, right? But since you understand so well, then, you must know what kind of power lies dormant in the bodies of such people when they rise. The red glow in Hao Fan's eyes faded with the appearance of the 5-leaf clover grimoire. As he finished speaking, the grimoire moved without wind, its pages flipping rapidly to a page with text, and then a great sword stained with red light fell from the sky. Clang! The sound of the great sword hitting the ground was crisp and shocking. At the same time, when Hao Fan's shadow was cast on the wall, it even took the shape of a demon. When the dandelion-like red light drifted aimlessly over the shadow, a casual glance at those clusters of red light was as soul-captivating as the eyes of a demon. This terrifying and eerie scene was unforgettable. Revchi's grimoire even fell to the ground out of fear. Now, feel the despair of the weak. From the moment Hao Fan grabbed the sword with both hands, his muscles bulged instantly. Chakra surged from the muscles in his arms all the way down to his calves, and the chain magic that had bound him before seemed to be made of mud, cracking apart inch by inch. Bang, 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 bang. As the chains shattered, streams of sickly green light emerged from Hao Fan's body, intertwining with the red glow on the great sword. At this moment, it was as if a demon had possessed him. Boom! Hao Fan suddenly exerted force with both calves, and his whole body shot out like a cannonball. No! Revchi opened his eyes wide in terror. He wanted to dodge, but his vision could only capture a trace of Hao Fan's afterimage. Although the great sword was dull, the weight of the sword itself and Hao Fan's full-force strike were enough to make it unstoppable. Boom! Revchi was slammed against the wall by the great sword. His internal organs were shattered, and in an instant, he had no breath left. What an overbearing and terrifying sword strike. Yuno stood stunned on the spot. He truly couldn't imagine that Asta, whom he had always thought hadn't made any progress, had quietly surpassed him by so much. You know, he had always carried the title of a genius, especially after receiving the recognition of the Clover Grimoire today, which made him unstoppable. Yet, he was completely powerless before a banished member of the Magic Knight squad. And this member, in front of Asta, was also completely powerless. Hey, this is your grimoire, right? Cherish it well. Such a precious thing, if you lose it again next time, I won't care about you. Hao Fan picked up Yuno's grimoire, threw it to Yuno, and then turned and left. The events in the alley were clearly seen by Rake and Will, who were trapped on the eaves. At this moment, the two of them were trembling even more violently, their eyes filled with despair for the future. This lightning-fast fight had made them thoroughly realize the gap between themselves and Hao Fan. If they had been even a little unconvinced before, now they only hoped never to meet this terrifying youth again in their lives. Whether it was the five-leaf clover grimoire, the strength that shattered chains just by moving, or the speed like a wild beast, any one of those abilities could easily kill them. Now they were even grateful that they had admitted defeat in time, otherwise, they would likely have been smashed into meat paste by that terrifying sword strike. Yuno took his grimoire and watched Hao Fan's dashing departing figure. That figure, both familiar and strange, how much ridicule and despair had it carried since the time they promised to become the Magic Emperor. This was something he didn't know. What he did know was that no matter how much suffering this youth carried, he seemed as immovable as a mountain, forever full of fighting spirit. I have worked so hard for so many years. I originally thought I wouldn't be a crybaby anymore. And all these years, Asta's height and magic power haven't grown at all, so I thought I finally had the ability to take care of him. But I didn't expect, so many years later, I am still like that boy in the snowy night, needing Asta to protect me. Yuno lowered his eyes, a bitter smile appearing on his lips, but he quickly pulled himself together. Because as Asta's rival, he could not show any signs of weakness. He, too, had to cut through thorns and thistles like Asta and eventually fulfill his ambition. Ding! You have awakened the five-leaf clover grimoire and obtained the Demon Slayer's sword. Demon Slayer sword. The tip of the sword can nullify magic, while the blade can reflect magic. In that case, with this sword, I don't have to fear any magic. On the way back to the church, the system's notification sounds kept ringing in Hao Fan's ears, which made him excited. In any world, strength is ultimately a hard indicator, otherwise, no matter where he goes, he would only be trampled upon by the strong. Ding! You have killed the first-class junior mage Revchi. Because the target was red-named, you have received a 300-point reward. Cool. Hao Fan couldn't help but whistle. A wild boar was only worth 5 points, he didn't expect a mage to be so valuable. As for the red name, it was the same principle as in games, killing such people would not incur any punishment and could also yield rich rewards from the system. It seemed Revchi hadn't done few wicked things in his daily life, otherwise he wouldn't be red-named. Being ended by his hands could be considered an act of justice. Hao Fan put away the great sword in his hand and rubbed his fingertips over the grimoire, which looked a bit old and even dirty. By the way, what the hell is this five-leaf clover grimoire? Usually, a person's grimoire only has 3 leaves. The leaves contain the most common, honesty, hope, and love. The 4th leaf harbors luck. So, what is the attribute that exists in the 5th leaf? Hao Fan asked the system in confusion. Generally, when encountering such professional questions, the system would provide answers. In the 5th leaf, resides a demon. A demon. That really suits my taste. After hearing the system's answer, Hao Fan's pupils contracted, and then he revealed a cold smile. Currently, Hao Fan had 1,000 points in his account. This was still 9,000 points away from the single Tomo Sharingan. But now that he had found a way to make money, Hao Fan became even more interested in joining the Magic Knight squad, so he could hunt powerful mages through high-difficulty missions to quickly increase his points. This was much better than hunting wild boars alone in the deep mountains and forests. After returning to Hage village, a group of rascals was training vigorously, and Hao Fan immediately joined the training ranks. Brother Asta is back. Did you get a grimoire? A child participating in the training asked impatiently. Hao Fan raised the grimoire in his hand, and a bunch of children were immediately happy for Hao Fan from the bottom of their hearts. Thanks to Hao Fan's care these days, while teaching them taijutsu, he hadn't skimped on the children regarding nutrition and healing potions. Therefore, their bodies were significantly stronger than they were a few months ago. Even the weakest child could now independently carry a tree that required 2 people to hug and walk with it as if flying. During this time, Hao Fan also tentatively taught everyone chakra, but there was no improvement at all. It seemed that in this world, only he could cultivate it. Brother Asta, what is your training volume today? A child asked curiously. They could almost see Hao Fan increasing his training volume every day. In their eyes, Hao Fan was like a Superman, completing training volumes they might never achieve in their entire lives. Today's training volume is tentatively set at 10,001 finger handstand per finger. After Hao Fan finished speaking, he cleanly and nimbly did a one-finger handstand. His body formed a powerful arc like a bowstring, which instantly sparked a chorus of exclamations. Brother Asta is truly a Superman. I can only do 101 finger handstand at the moment, and that's with my thumb, but Brother Asta can actually reach 10,000 per finger. After watching Hao Fan's training for a while, the children also hurriedly continued their own training. At this time, the father and others returned from shopping in the town. This group of children really knows how to burn with youth, it makes my old arms and legs itch. The father sighed. Asta is really much more sensible than before. Now he not only has his previous vitality but also possesses extraordinary leadership skills, only. Sister Lily's gaze dimmed as she said this. Because they had left early, they didn't know that Hao Fan had also awakened a grimoire, so they still thought Hao Fan was destined to live his whole life as an ordinary person without magic power in this lowest class Hage village. Giving up hope early might actually be a good thing for Asta. The father sighed. Born like duckweed, yet with such lofty ambitions. Now that even his last chance was gone, this kind of blow was something few adults could withstand, but it was now cruelly placed before a 15-year-old boy. Sometimes, the cruelest thing in the world is not punishment, but the moment when dreams are shattered. Maybe Asta will never be able to cast magic in his life, but I believe he will definitely not remain mediocre. Father, I'm going to train too. Ever since he started training with Hao Fan, Nash became increasingly convinced that Hao Fan's life would never be as hopeless as everyone saw. Even without magic, Hao Fan was far stronger than most people. Such a strong person would never be buried by fate. It's really good to be young. The father pounded his old arms and legs, they would ache after just walking 2 steps. However, the potion that Asta had him soak in a few days ago, which felt like chili peppers, was really effective. His body was now significantly better than before. In the evening, when everyone was eating. What? Asta also awakened a grimoire. The father and others looked in surprise at Nash, who revealed this news. This was simply amazing, Asta had actually awakened a grimoire. What's so amazing about it? I think it's only natural. Nash pouted quietly. He had successfully advanced to become Hao Fan's little fanboy, admiring Might Guy's theory of youth to the point of complete submission. If it weren't for the different worlds, he would definitely be Might Guy's good disciple. Yuno stopped eating his pork chop and lifted his eyes slightly. He agreed with Nash's words very much. As the man who inspired his fighting spirit, how could Asta not be chosen by a grimoire? Asta, you have finally come to the end of your hardships. God has finally given you what a normal person should have, for the sake of my day and night prayers. The father, with tears streaming down his face, snatched Hao Fan's pig trotter, sighing at the manifestation of a miracle while eating like a big pig trotter himself. Hao Fan rolled his eyes and served himself a bowl of nutritious snake soup. This was a snake soup he had made in the forest using 3 types of snake meat and 2 types of herbs. The taste was extremely delicious. Men who ate it would strengthen their bones, and women who ate it would nourish their beauty. As the church's menu became increasingly rich, the children in the church also grew very well. Since participating in the Grimoire Award ceremony in March, Hao Fan had been concentrating on training in the village. By the time the Magic Knight Squad exam was about to start half a year later, his body had reached the level of opening the Gate of Rest. This was the second gate of the 8 gates, belonging to a transitional stage. Opening the first gate, the Gate of Opening, allows Hao Fan to perform the front lotus. However, because his body has just reached the condition to open the 8 gates, he experiences a momentary pause after opening it due to the pain caused by the gate. This creates a situation where if he fails to defeat his opponent instantly after opening it, he will find himself in a predicament. But once his body reached the physical standard to open the Gate of Rest, performing the front lotus while opening the 8 gates became effortless, and he no longer had to worry about the consequence of getting himself into trouble if the first strike failed. One day, the tower master of the Grimoire Tower came to discuss with the priest, saying that he wanted to send Hao Fan and Yuno to participate in the Magic Knight Squad exam in the royal capital. At first, the priest refused, because two children were leaving at once, and his heart ached. The royal capital is far from Hage village, not to mention the hardships of the journey, and even if they reach the royal capital, there is no guarantee they will pass. Therefore, he protested slightly, Yuno is fine, but even if Asta goes, I'm afraid he won't pass, right? How about? Are you underestimating the children's abilities? Do you remember the two nobles I recommended earlier, one named Rake and one named Will? Ever since they participated in the Grimoire awarding that day, they knelt and begged me not to let them participate in the Magic Knight Squad exam. And the reason they lost confidence like this is because they were defeated by Asta. The tower master said meaningfully. But the priest still wanted to make a last-ditch effort, but the tower master was an old, experienced person who didn't give the priest any chance to catch his breath. Are you reluctant to let Asta go? The tower master teased. How is that possible? That brat, although he has learned to be obedient recently, he was like a mud monkey before. The priest nagged and listed Asta's past faults. So, you are still reluctant to let Asta go? The tower master said affirmatively, having mastered the true essence of the Buddha's lesson, you were beaten by the monkey. I said it's not that, how could I possibly be? Fine, fine, let them go together so they can look out for each other on the road. The priest waved his hand, and for the sake of face, he had to compromise. After the spots were confirmed, Hao Fan and Yuno decided to set off in 3 days. During this time, Hao Fan arranged many things. For example, he specially built a warehouse next to the church and spent 500 points to exchange for 500 bottles of healing potion. He believed this was enough for Nash and the others to use for a year. He also took time to build individual rooms for the church, so that every child had an independent room, and before leaving, he even repaired the fence around Hage village with Nash and the others. These actions made the priest complain, Asta, why do I feel like you are very confident about this Magic Knight Squad exam? These days you are either arranging this or that, could it be? Are you the illegitimate son of the Magic Emperor? The priest finally thought of a possibility and said with bright eyes. PFF'd. Lily, Nash, Yuno, and the others couldn't help but spit out their water. This imagination was truly wild. What kind of good things are you thinking about? You want to be related to the Magic Emperor that much? Hao Fan rolled his eyes. Nowadays, he was very tall, already half a head taller than Yuno. This was the charm of taijutsu. Through half a year of hard training, he had completely grown into a handsome youth with a broad build. What are you saying, am I that kind of sycophant? The priest was a bit annoyed, but when he thought about the fact that Hao Fan and Yuno were about to set off, he felt sad again. A church without Hao Fan was lifeless. Early the next morning, Hao Fan and Yuno officially set off. Traveling is also a form of training. Hao Fan stood on his hands and began to travel by hand. This behavior attracted the attention of many passers-by, but most of them just took a casual glance. Their eyes were mostly on Yuno, because Yuno was also traveling while practicing magic, and the momentum he created was quite grand. The two's actions attracted the attention of a group also heading to the royal capital. In this group, a man with blonde hair and silver clothes was the most eye-catching, and he also vaguely occupied a dominant position in the group. The two of you must also be heading to the royal capital to participate in the Magic Knight Squad exam. The journey is difficult, not only do you have to guard against floods and wild beasts, but also against some robbers. I happen to know a shortcut to the royal capital, why not travel together? The blonde man walked up to Yuno and said. He had extraordinary insight and had long noticed that there was a 4-leaf clover engraved on the back of Yuno's grimoire. Yuno glanced at Hao Fan and remained silent. For him, it didn't matter whether he followed the group or explored on their own. Hao Fan didn't even have the interest to pay attention to the blonde man, but the fleeting greed in the blonde man's eyes piqued Hao Fan's interest. Judging by his demeanor, the blonde man looked very much like a noble, but because Hao Fan was standing on his hands, he noticed that the blonde man's hands were full of calluses. Moreover, although his clothes were gorgeous, the pant legs were much too long. Clearly, this outfit did not belong to him. And his eyes were constantly lingering on Yuno's grimoire. It seemed 9 times out of 10 that he was a robber. Sure. Hao Fan straightened up and said. He was taller than the blonde man, and his aura was more majestic than the blonde man's, which made the blonde man, who originally boasted of his brilliance, look disgraced. Then, let's join the group together. The people behind are also participating in this Magic Night Squad exam. The blonde man said with a fake smile, vaguely feeling that Hao Fan was not easy to deal with. This group was very large, estimated to be about 20 people, including 3 decent-looking girls. From time to time, boys wanting to curry favor would appear around these 3 girls, but the girls' eyes were always lingering on Hao Fan, and the blonde man. The 2 who joined later are both so handsome. Yes, especially that silver-haired boy, his eyes are so beautiful. But, looking at their clothes, they should also be commoners, and Kier, who organized us together, is a noble. The 3 girls whispered. Although Kier's demeanor was extraordinary, compared to Hao Fan and it was obviously lacking. Moreover, relying on female intuition, they always felt that Kier's eyes were a bit uncomfortable. If it weren't for his noble birth, they would have likely excluded him long ago. Big brother Kier, isn't this road leading into the mountains? It doesn't seem to be in the direction of the royal capital. After walking for a while, a gray-haired boy couldn't help asking. Everyone, you might not know, but it rained heavily a few days ago, and the mountains here are prone to mudslides. So, for safety reasons, I led everyone this way. If you think it's a detour, you can go ahead and wait. Kier smiled lightly, bringing out the excuse he had long prepared. Ah, I'll listen to Big Brother Kier. The gray-haired boy immediately chickened out when he heard Kier tell him to leave the group. The royal capital was so far away, if he had to walk alone, he definitely wouldn't make it. Big Brother Kier is amazing, he even thought of this. Yes, we will all listen to Big Brother Kier, safety first. A group of boys began to flatter him, and even the good-looking girl looked at him with some admiration in her beautiful eyes. Hao Fan curled his lips. Was the fox's tail finally about to be revealed? He rubbed the dirt on his hands, feeling that his great sword was already impatient. Back then, a first-class junior mage gave him 300 points, now he just didn't know how many mages were in this group of bandits. Looking at Kier's attitude of accepting everyone, surely the scale of this bandit group wouldn't disappoint him. A devilish smile appeared on Hao Fan's face. Hunting points, that was his purpose for following Kier. When everyone deviated from the main road and walked onto the mountain path, Hao Fan had already started checking the surrounding situation. 2 on the big tree to the front left, 2 behind the boulder, 5 crouching in the grass on the right, and 10 following behind. The number is a bit small. I hope that when we reach the proper place, 100 or 200 people will pop out. Hao Fan was slightly disappointed. Not only were there few people, but this clumsy hiding technique was enough to prove that these people's magic power was not high. However, even a small fly is still meat. He had to earn back the points spent on the healing potions from these people no matter what. Brother Kier, why do I feel like someone is following us? A boy walked timidly to Kier's side and said. Yes, Brother Kier, are there bandits nearby? Several more sensitive boys couldn't help but gather toward Kier. A heavy atmosphere suddenly condensed in the group, and the 3 girls became even more nervous. Finally someone noticed, not completely hopeless. Hao Fan glanced at and didn't speak, but seemed to understand Hao Fan's meaning and immediately pretended to be indifferent. At this time, although everyone was already on guard, it was already too late. If Hao Fan hadn't followed, these boys and girls would all die today. It's just some wind blowing through the grass, don't be nervous. Kier said casually. But, I feel like there are people. A boy said nervously. I remember your name is Cheke, right? Do you know why I wanted to unite everyone? It's precisely because the mountain road is not safe that we need to travel together. Now that there are so many of us, and we are all proud children of heaven who are going to participate in the Magic Night Squad exam, I believe that even if we encounter a few blind bandits, we will easily solve them. So you shouldn't be afraid. Could it be that you want to show off as a coward in front of the 3 beautiful ladies and lose face? Kier said in a spring breeze manner. It must be said that he was quite good at coaxing people. Under this flattery, he immediately dispelled everyone's fear. Exactly, Cheke, you are too embarrassing. With so many of us, what blind bandit would dare to rob us? Now I almost want to encounter bandits. The boys began to try hard to draw a line with Cheke, as if this could show their bravery. Some even wished they could encounter a few bandits right now to show off their strength. PFF'd. The three girls also chuckled, and the previous terrifying atmosphere vanished instantly. Kier walked to the front of the group, and a cold expression slowly solidified on his face. In his view, these ignorant boys and girls were as weak as lambs, simply waiting to be slaughtered at will. Hao Fan glanced at the fat boy who said he wanted to encounter bandits, thinking to himself that even if this kid cried for his father and mother later, he wouldn't save him. Just let him show off his bravery in front of the beauties. Kier led everyone for a while longer, and this time they finally arrived in the depths of the mountains. The bandits who had been hiding their figures just barely didn't even want to pretend anymore and walked out from the shadows one after another. These people included those who were missing an arm, missing an eye, and those whose faces were full of terrifying scars. They were all in their prime, and from the moment they appeared, they carried a very strong smell of blood. This was the aura that one would only get after killing to a certain extent. Judging from their aura, they were all bandits who licked blood from the edge of a knife. People. Cheke's terrified voice became shrill. Are there really bandits? Brother Kier, what do we do now? The group of boys' faces all changed. Some boys even had their legs go weak and collapsed to the ground just by seeing the ferocious appearance of these bandits, let alone taking out their grimoires to fight. And the fat boy who had been shouting about fighting the bandits for 300 rounds was now trembling even in his facial fat. Brother Kier, hurry and let us to resist. Seeing that everyone was about to be scared to death, a boy said anxiously. If this continued, I'm afraid they would be defeated without the bandits even needing to make a move. Resist? Are you telling a joke? Kier suddenly laughed in a weird way, as if he had heard a huge joke. He turned his head and looked at everyone mockingly. At this moment, his face was a bit distorted, and the noble air he had pretended to have instantly turned into viciousness. This change of face made everyone's heart tremble. The three girls who had been interested in Kier earlier were shaking all over, feeling that this world was too scary. A person who was refined just a moment ago could turn into a thug in the blink of an eye. Are you with them? Cheke said while collapsing on the ground, but he realized it a bit too late. Ha ha ha, the surprise moment has arrived. Welcome everyone to the temporary camp of our powerful fierce dragon bandit group. As the saying goes, a fierce dragon does not cross the river. Our bandit group has just arrived in this country and really doesn't have any decent gifts to offer, so we will use you 27 youths who are about to participate in the Magic Knight Squad assessment as a sacrifice. Kier stood on a rock, having completely torn off his mask. While he was speaking, members of the fierce dragon bandit group kept walking out from the depths of the jungle. All in all, there were already over 100 people. You actually want to sacrifice us? Kier said in terror, feeling that this world was just too terrifying. That's right, this is the only way to make a name for our bandit group. Of course, there are 3 beautiful young girls among you. My precious ladies, rest assured, the ritual awaiting you will involve some bleeding, but it won't take your lives. After Kier finished speaking, he laughed perversely. At the same time, the members of the fierce dragon bandit group who had walked out of the forest also laughed unscrupulously. Well done, Kier. At least your pretty face wasn't for nothing. A tall, burly man walked out. His physique was very sturdy, and he even had children's skulls hanging around his neck. The moment he appeared, it was like a horn of doomsday had been blown. The youths who had originally wanted to put up a fight fell into despair. With the enemy's vast numbers and the fact that they were all adult bandits who lived by the blade, how could they possibly fight back? Bandit group leader ready, we've caught a big fish this time. The grimoire in that child's hand is actually a 4-leaf clover. Kier pointed at Yuno and said, angling for credit. Is it the same grimoire as the first magic emperors? Reddy looked at the grimoire in front of Yuno, his 2 eyes, which looked like a rat's, revealing a greedy look. This gaze made Yuno very uncomfortable, as if he had become a fat sheep ready for the slaughter. What a disgusting gaze. Asta, shall we go? Yuno came behind Hao Fan, already poised for action. The accompanying youths also subconsciously moved closer to Hao Fan. Because the aura on Hao Fan was something even Kier, who hadn't fully revealed his true colors, couldn't compare to. In such a critical moment, they instinctively gravitated toward the strong. You're called Kier, right? You're right, the moment of surprise has indeed arrived. Hao Fan revealed a brilliant smile. So far, 132 bandits had appeared. He felt as if he could already smell the scent of the Sharingan. Slaughter time has arrived. Whoosh! As Hao Fan stepped out, a crimson grimoire appeared out of thin air, and a huge heavy sword landed with a bang. Hao Fan grabbed the heavy sword with both hands, his muscles bulging as if they were about to explode. A mix of pale green and blood red light intertwined on both sides of his body like a dragon and tiger fighting. Hao Fan carried the sword and began to slowly accelerate, finally charging toward the bandit group leader ready like a fierce beast. Earth release magic. Giant shield. Reddy was taken aback. He had originally wanted to mock Hao Fan by saying something like, "What era is this, and you're still using a sword?" But when he saw Hao Fan's aura, which was like a blue fierce beast, his body couldn't help but tremble involuntarily. His hair stood on end. This was a fear from the depths of his soul, so he immediately deployed his strongest magic shield. Boom! The soil suddenly surged out 4 towering earth walls, wrapping Reddy and Kier inside. These 4 earth walls were extremely sturdy and could withstand many powerful magic and physical attacks. They were Reddy's ultimate means of survival. However, 1 second passed, then 2 seconds, and the earth walls didn't even budge. Could he be a paper tiger? Reddy wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. The aura from just a moment ago had really startled him, but he hadn't expected that when the sword hit the earth release, it wouldn't even make a sound. But the next moment, screams sounded like a mountain-shaking tsunami. Help! Help me! He is a devil! Reddy and Kier looked at each other in dismay after hearing the screams. Could it be that the members had already started a massacre? After all, his members were notorious thugs who did like to torture people a bit before killing them. So, it wasn't strange that those youths were making such miserable cries. But, these voices didn't sound like they were coming from young people, did they? Boss, should we open a crack and take a look? Kier suggested. Okay. Reddy changed his magic form. When he opened 4 windows, his eyes instantly widened, because the ones crying for help were actually his own members. Help me, boss. Someone save us. The first one. The second one. The 32nd one. Hao Fan was like a whirlwind, his speed reaching a point where it was difficult for the naked eye to capture. Every time he arrived beside a bandit, he would use the heavy sword in his hand to send them flying high into the sky. The physically weak ones would die immediately, and the strong ones, although they didn't die the moment they were struck, would fall to their deaths upon landing. The 52nd one. The left side is completely cleared. Next is the right side. Hao Fan stopped, his figure appearing before everyone's eyes again. But at this moment, the ground where he stood was as empty as if a swarm of locusts had passed through, while the sky was filled with screaming bandits. Gulp. The boys and girls who had come to join the Magic Knight squad swallowed hard. This scene was simply too shocking. A group of bandits who lived by the blade had no ability to resist under Hao Fan's heavy sword. Bang! Bang bang bang! As the first bandits who were sent flying fell, the ones sent flying later fell to the ground like dumplings, one after another, dead. Ding! You killed a red named 3rd class junior mage and received 100 points as a reward. Ding! You killed a red named 2nd class junior mage and received 200 points as a reward. Ding! You killed a red named 1st class junior mage and received 300 points as a reward. Ding! This time you killed a total of 43rd class junior mages, receiving 4,000 points as a reward. You killed 10 2nd class junior mages, receiving 2,000 points as a reward. You killed 2 1st class junior mages, receiving 600 points as a reward. A total of 6,600 points reward. Hao Fan heard the final summary, his heartbeat accelerating suddenly. Just by taking care of a few small fries, he had actually obtained over 6,000 points. Sure enough, hunting powerful mages was a correct choice. Hao Fan looked at the bandits on the right, his gaze instantly becoming fiery. These were all walking points. Look, the devil is staring at us. Fight him to the death. Wood creation magic. Million wood arrows. Fire creation magic. Fire dragons roar. Water magic. Great water pillar. Wind magic. Rapid wind blades. The members of the fierce dragon bandit group on the right were panicked at this moment. They had just witnessed with their own eyes Hao Fan slaughtering the members on the left in less than 5 seconds. You have to know that there were several first-class junior mages there, who were the backbone of the group, yet they didn't even have the ability to resist. So, these people, still in shock, didn't care about magic attribute restraint anymore. They threw their strongest magic at Hao Fan all at once. In an instant, the sky was full of magic. Fire magic like fire dragons, ice magic like ice dragons, wind blades, wood arrows, water pillars, all kinds of colorful magic carrying an aura that seemed capable of destroying the world swept toward Hao Fan. For a moment, everyone felt that the world was about to be swallowed by this wave of magic attacks. Many youths participating in the Magic Knights squad exam fell to the ground, fearful under the weight of this magic that felt like the power of heaven and earth. Even Yuno, who was always calm, felt a bit alarmed at this moment. That kid will definitely die, right? Kier said, trembling. Otherwise, if he didn't die under this kind of attack, he would probably be the one to die. This is the fat sheep you picked for me. This is a devil. Reddy slapped Kier across the face. Two of Kier's front teeth were knocked out immediately, and half of his face was swollen. But he still didn't feel satisfied and beat Kier up fiercely again. This is just the right time for a one-pot sweep. Hao Fan held the Demon Slayer sword horizontally, taking this opportunity to test the sword's ability to reflect magic. Get back. Hao Fan held the sword with one hand, his legs suddenly exerting force. Chakra frantically condensed into his leg muscles. After taking 2 steps to build momentum, his right foot stepped heavily on the ground, and then he leapt into the air. Sizzle sizzle. In midair, Hao Fan used the Demon Slayer sword to block dozens of types of magic converging in one place. The impact generated by the numerous spells was actually greater than that of a waterfall rushing down from 100-foot height. And the force Hao Fan used to reflect these spells back was equivalent to using a sword to push the water flow back under a 100-foot waterfall. One can imagine how much strength this required. 8 gates. Gate of Rest. Hao Fan in the middle of being deadlocked with the impact generated by the numerous spells, he decisively opened the second gate of the 8 gates. His whole body's strength surged rapidly. At this moment, the Demon Slayer sword in his hand felt like it was made of wood, and the impact generated by the numerous spells felt like air, completely ignored. From where you came, go back to where you came from. Hao Fan roared. His silver hair fluttered, and green and red light intersected. He truly looked like a demon god. And those spells that had converged in one place were all batted back like baseballs in an instant. Bang! Bang bang bang! Countless wood arrows, wind blades, and ice swords returned at an unstoppable speed toward their origins. The mages who had released these spells didn't even have time to react and were all buried by their own magic. Ding! You killed a red-named third-class junior mage and received 100 points as a reward. Ding! You killed a red-named second-class junior mage and received 200 points as a reward. Ding! You killed a red-named first-class junior mage and received 300 points as a reward. Ding! This time you killed a total of 50 third-class junior mages, receiving 5,000 points as a reward. You killed 20 second-class junior mages, receiving 4,000 points as a reward. You killed 8 first-class junior mages, receiving 2,400 points as a reward. A total of 11,400 points reward. Over 11,000 points. This is awesome. Hao Fan excitedly listened to the system prompts. At this moment, he felt his whole body boiling with blood. Finding the right method to obtain points was indeed easy. Now, just by easily wiping out a bandit group, his points were almost reaching 20,000. Is this a god? The boys and girls who had almost been sacrificed looked at this scene, stunned. Hao Fan, who landed from midair, was clearly the same age as them, but in front of these fierce bandits, they were so scared that their hands and feet went soft, while Hao Fan wiped out a whole bandit group by himself. No, the bandit group's leader had not been wiped out yet. Earth Creation Magic. Giant Shield. Earth Creation Magic. Giant Shield. After witnessing Hao Fan slaughtering his members, Reddy was like a startled quail, sparing no effort to exhaust all his magic to release his life-saving skills. Layer after layer of earth walls were stacked, reaching a thickness of 7 or 8 meters. But Reddy still didn't feel any sense of security. He was completely afraid. Afraid of this youth who seemed like a demon god. Boss, help me. After witnessing the whole process, Kier was no better off. At this moment, his hands and feet were soft, and he collapsed to the ground, not even having the courage to cast magic, looking exactly like the boys and girls outside who had just discovered they were surrounded by the bandit group. I'll help your grandma. Lighty stepped on Kier's head. Gritting his teeth, he used all his strength, and with a squelch, he actually trampled Kier to death. It's time to end this. Hao Fan looked at the earth wall that resembled a turtle shell, lifted the Demon Slayer's sword, and leapt up. Under the effect of the Demon Slayer's sword, that sturdy earth wall was as good as non-existent. Wherever the heavy sword passed, the earth wall immediately crumbled, finally revealing Lighty's terrified, fat face. No. Lighty let out a shrill scream, but the Demon Slayer's sword in Hao Fan's hand showed no sign of stopping. Boom. The Demon Slayer sword smashed heavily into Lighty. With this, the fierce dragon bandit group was completely annihilated. Ding. You killed a red-named intermediate mage and obtained 500 points. Not bad. Hao Fan was very satisfied with this finishing strike. Thus, he had obtained a total of 18,500 points from annihilating the fierce dragon bandit group. Adding his existing 500 points, that made 19,000 points. This was truly a huge harvest. Is it all resolved? And completely wiped out, not a single one left. God, I'm really lucky to have met such a powerful companion. Thinking about it now, it's really terrifying. If we hadn't met him, we would have been sacrificed by that bandit by now, right? A group of boys and girls wept with joy. For them, this was a true escape from the jaws of death. Asta, when did you become so strong? Yuno looked at Hao Fan in disbelief. To outsiders, it seemed like Asta had always been chasing his footsteps, but in reality, only he knew that he had always been chasing Asta's footsteps. He envied Asta's strength, so he became strong himself. But once upon a time, he thought he was strong enough, powerful enough. For a while, he even thought he had surpassed Asta, but now he realized that he had been looking up to Asta all along. Thank you so much for saving us. My name is Lisa, and I live in Landline Village. If you happen to pass by here in the future, I will definitely treat you well. As the most beautiful of the three girls, Lisa walked toward Hao Fan with gratitude and confidence. Oh, are you planning to go home? Hao Fan asked calmly. He could sense Lisa's intentional or unintentional flattery. The girl in front of him was indeed beautiful, but there was a bit too much worldliness about her. She seemed adept at currying favor, which made her unlikable. We haven't been out of Landline Village for long, and we already encountered such danger. The road to the royal capital is still long, and I can't imagine what other dangers we might face, so I plan to go home. Lisa never expected to join the Magic Knight squad when heading to the royal capital. She just wanted to add a feather in her cap for her life, so that when she returned to the village, her beauty could make her a highly sought-after suitor. But if the road to the royal capital was too dangerous, she would never persist. Lisa. The other two girls' eyes dimmed upon hearing Lisa's decision. As girls, even if they banded together, it was indeed too difficult to travel thousands of miles to the royal capital, so they also decided to give up. Consequently, many of the boys immediately expressed their decision to give up on going to the royal capital. Because they had witnessed the horror of the fierce dragon bandit group in Hao Fan's power, they felt that this world was not as simple as they had imagined. Being selected as a genius at a Grimoire tower didn't mean anything. This gave them the feeling of falling from the clouds into the mud. Sure enough, compared to the outside world, the peaceful village is more suitable for me. I originally thought about going to the royal capital to broaden my horizons, but the cost of broadening my horizons is too high. I can't afford it. A group of boys and girls soon said their goodbyes. Hao Fan and Yuno had already left. The remaining boys who wanted to follow Hao Fan saw this and could only helplessly choose to go home, because they really didn't have the courage to continue on the road. Open them all. Hao Fan said as he walked. Dojutsu. Single Tomo Sharingan 10,000 points. D-rank Ninjutsu. Shadow Shuriken 50 points. Binding Technique 50 points. Clone Technique 50 points. Transformation Technique 50 points. Items. Soldier Pill 1 point for 10. Kunai 1 point for 10. Healing Potion 1 point per bottle. All ninjutsu, exchange for all of them. Hao Fan curled his lips and said domineeringly, 19,000 points, that's just how willful he could be. Ding. Successfully exchanged for Single Tomo Sharingan, costing 10,000 points. Single Tomo Sharingan. Normal effect. Slows down enemy attack speed, improves insight. Special effect. 30% chance to cast genjutsu, 30% chance to copy the opponent's magic. Finally exchanged for you. Hao Fan's pupils began to change. The field of vision in front of him turned blood red, and then the beautiful amber iris was like red dye being introduced into clear water, gradually turning into an enchanting dark red. A circle of black lines appeared around the black pupil, and a dot of ink like tomo circled on this black line. The single tomo Sharingan was fully opened. At this time, Hao Fan looked at the surrounding scene, which was clearer as if a magnifying glass had been installed. The texture of the distant trees, the furry limbs of spiders, and every vibration of butterflies could be seen clearly. However, after looking for a long time, his eyes would emit a burning, stinging pain. Close eyes. Hao Fan quickly said. When he opened his eyes again, the dark red iris had returned to the beautiful amber color. This was the power of the system. Even the innate dojutsu could be retracted and deployed at will. Ding. Successfully exchanged for D-rank ninjutsu Shadow Shuriken, costing 50 points. Shadow Shuriken technique. Normal effect. Injects one's own power into the blade. If it hits the enemy's shadow, it can lock the enemy's movement for 0.5 seconds. Can be used at most 3 times a day. Special effect. None. Swish. Hao Fan casually shot toward a branch. The sharp kunai nailed tightly into the branch with a thud, startling a flock of sparrows, but one sparrow with the fullest wings paused as if electrocuted, and only then did it dart away. Very powerful. Hao Fan's heart couldn't help but beat faster. Shadow Shuriken was an extremely tricky ninjutsu even in the world of Naruto. You have to know that in this cruel world where every second counts, a pause of even 0.1 seconds could be fatal. Not to mention that people in this world originally despised taijutsu, so they were already slow in their actions. Now, with another 0.5 second pause, Hao Fan truly possessed the capital to kill powerful enemies in seconds. Ding. Successfully exchanged for D-rank ninjutsu clone technique, costing 50 points. Normal effect. Can create a clone to confuse the enemy. Special effect. None. So useless. Hao Fan expressed his disdain first. However, as the lowest level clone technique, the D-rank clone technique didn't seem to have any other use besides putting on a show, so he let it go. Ding. Successfully exchanged for D-rank ninjutsu transformation technique, costing 50 points. Normal effect. Can transform into any object seen, lasts for half an hour, will dissipate if subjected to strong magic fluctuations. Special effect. None. Passable. Hao Fan gave a 2-word evaluation haughtily, and then exited the Naruto Mall. This consumption was 10,200 points, remaining 8,800 points. It seems that having too many points is also a trouble. Hao Fan raised an eyebrow. This feeling of having too much money was really great, but he had already exchanged everything in the Naruto Mall, so it was time for the mall to update, right? Ding. Detected that the host has purchased all items in the mall. Upgrading the mall requires 50,000 points. Do you want to upgrade? Hao Fan moved his throat, indicating he didn't want to talk to the system, and spat a mouthful of thick phlegm at the system. The following journey, although not smooth sailing, was clearly not easy to encounter big fish like the fierce dragon bandit group. So, until the two arrived at the royal capital of the Clover Kingdom, Hao Fan had only accumulated 15,000 points, which was simply pathetic compared to annihilating the fierce dragon bandit group. This is the royal capital of the Clover Kingdom, it really looks like a big cake. Hao Fan looked around, then walked into the royal capital with Yuno. Just the prosperity of the lowest level made the two feel overwhelmed. After asking about the location and time of the Magic Knight Squad exam, the two found a medium-sized inn to stay in. As for money, there was no need to worry, because the money robbed from those bandits along the way was enough for the two to splurge in the royal capital for a while. 3 days later, the noisy royal capital suddenly quieted down, and then beautiful fireworks bloomed from the sky. Immediately after, cheers erupted from outside a building that looked like a coliseum. This was the time for the Magic Knight Squad exam. Hao Fan and Yuno arrived at the exam location. The entrance was surrounded by crowds who came to cheer. These people included locals from the royal capital and parents who specifically escorted their children. In short, it was very enthusiastic. Come on, young men. The future of the Clover is all up to you. I really hope that your generation can produce a resounding figure, so I can brag in the future that I once watched this legendary exam. Various sounds erupted from the crowd from time to time. Hao Fan looked around. Sure enough, it was worthy of being the royal capital. There were really quite a few stylish and pretty girls. Let's go. Yuno said with dissatisfaction. Tisk, no sense of romance. Hao Fan rolled his eyes and walked into the exam location. Everyone first conducted a simple identity test, mainly taking out their grimoire to take a look, and then they could enter the exam hall. After passing the identity test, Hao Fan and Yuno walked into a huge circular arch one after another. Behind the arch was a very large open space, and on the corridor above the open space were 9 thrones, which corresponded to the captains of the 9 Magic Knight squads. At this time, the 9 captains of the Magic Knight squad had not yet arrived, so many boys and girls who came to take the exam began to strike up conversations with each other, and soon they were divided into 2 distinct groups. One was the group of gorgeously dressed nobles, and the other was the group of ordinary commoners. So cute, these little birds. When the candidates had almost all entered, a flock of birds with blue wings, which seemed to have exploded hair, descended, immediately attracting the attention of many innocent girls. These birds, they really like me, they all flew towards me. This reminds me of the white doves that represent peace in the square. Hao Fan opened his arms, a look of enjoyment appeared on his face. Sure enough, this charm that had nowhere to hide was irresistible even to creatures like birds. Surely he must be the center of attention now, right? After all, girls are obsessed with boys who even animals are eager to get close to. PFF'd. Look at that guy, he's so funny, surrounded by so many demon-repelling birds, he actually doesn't feel ashamed at all, but instead has an expression of enjoyment. It's no wonder. Judging by his clothes, he should be a bumpkin who just arrived in the city. It's not surprising that he doesn't recognize the demon-repelling birds. But the grimoire towers in these small places are too much, actually sending someone with such low magic power. This really makes this young master feel a kind of humiliation. 2 noble boys, who were shorter and whose looks were 18 streets worse than Hao Fan's, seized the opportunity to start mocking. And with the popularization by those in the know, the names and functions of these birds were known to everyone. Disgusting. Don't come near me. Being chased by too many demon-repelling birds might make the Magic Knight squad captains look down on me. Almost everyone reflexively drove away the demon-repelling birds around them, because whoever was surrounded by the most demon-repelling birds meant they were the most incompetent. Even the girls who initially thought these birds were cute started to avoid them. Ah. Hao Fan had a face full of black lines, his already cold face became even more ruthless. If you dare to come near me again, I'll slaughter you. Chirp chirp. The demon-repelling birds seemed to be able to understand human speech. Under Hao Fan's terrifying aura, they immediately scattered. Soon, with Hao Fan as the origin, let alone birds, even people didn't dare to approach within a 10-meter radius. What a terrifying aura. The 2 noble boys who previously intended to further mock Hao Fan saw that the situation was not right and hurried into the crowd. Avoiding harm is ultimately an instinct of humans, even noblemen who think they are extraordinary cannot avoid it. Look, there are also no demon-repelling birds around that black-haired boy. A person pointed at Yuno and said. Could it be that he also scared away the demon-repelling birds? How is that possible? Don't you see so many people around him? What powerful magic power. Even those nobles have 1 or 2 around them, but there isn't even one around him. What a powerful existence. I heard he also possesses the same clover grimoire as the first magic emperor. HMPH. Occasionally there will be a large one among the bugs, but the nobility or baseness of bloodline is always hard to change. Yuno's existence undoubtedly attracted the attention of the whole audience. Whether it was jealous eyes or contemptuous eyes, they all converged on him, leaving Hao Fan nakedly ignored. Tisk, a bunch of short-sighted mortals. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and support our channel for more stories.